This was one of the best analogies I've ever heard. They say LLMs are like a freshly minted PhD student, book smart as hell.
Yeah.
But go ask it to solve the problem that only a 20-year-old vet would know. Not there. Because if you think about it, once you go outside the LLM's knowledge set, like take like Claude or something like that, and it goes, I've been trained since 2024. Go ask it a fact that happened last week. It goes, I don't know.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have access to that data, or it's not refreshed, or it hasn't been trained, or it doesn't have the ability to go out and get it, it doesn't know. It's limited in its data set. And I've always said the hardest thing to do in AI right now, even in telco, is train that AI to think like a telco domain expert.
Yeah.
And so telco domain expertise is absolutely critical. There will be no AI system built, right, for AI without telco. I'm convinced of that. We started doing AI projects and we started doing with data science. They couldn't get anywhere until we brought the telco guys in, because the telco guys, they knew the use case, they knew the problem statement, they knew the data that was relevant, and they were the ones that could tell you whether it was crap or not.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. It's going to be our last one for a couple of weeks because it's half term, which means Pierre's got to go gallivanting around the world. Or are you just going over the channel, Pierre, this time?
Yeah.
That'll be a yes, I'm going to the channel. He's a man of few words, which is just as well because most of them are French. No,
wait, is that why you didn't? Well, I don't remember because I leave on Thursday. So.
Yeah, we just thought we had a chat.
Yeah.
We had another, last week I was bitching about us sort of messing up the schedule. And then we've got one coming up, and I went, right, we're all good for this, and everyone was like, yeah, and I went, right, we've got someone booked in here, and goes, no, I'm not around then.
Next week, yeah.
Yeah, no, the week after the French Open Friday.
But we're not doing one next week.
We're not doing one next week.
Because
see what I got to deal with, audience?
Some gallivanting next week as well.
Anyway, we're delighted to have a special guest, Brandon Larson from Mavenir. Hi, Brandon. You're our second Mavenir. We had Richard Baker, was it twice, I think?
John Baker.
John, who's Richard Baker?
Bloody hell, you've only
An
just
actor.
started.
He's an
You've only
actor.
just started and you
John-
start getting names wrong.
John's going to be insulted now.
He is.
Sorry, John.
Is John listening?
But he might, I don't know if he follows it. Anymore.
He's not the one who's Doctor Who, was he?
John Baker's not Doctor Who.
No, who was Doctor Who? Was
That's
Baker?
Tom Baker.
Tom Baker.
Some Baker. He had some Baker in here.
That noise you can hear in the background is Brandon's colleague Emma.
Sorry, he was a BBC broadcaster back in the day.
Right, there we go. Oh, yeah, he was a newsreader.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But John Baker.
Doctor Who.
Brandon's colleague Emma, who was here for the John Baker ones, for all the Doctor Who ones. She came in a TARDIS, straight from Malta. Hi, Emma. And that was her dropping her phone thinking, what are these idiots talking about?
She wanted to get in on the action,
And we got to give her... do you mind if I just hold up your beer for illustration, Brandon?
Do that, yeah.
So Emma is from Malta, and she's brought some Maltese lager over called Chisk.
It's pretty good.
So thanks a lot, Emma. Oh, look, she's going to do a selfie. Look, while we're live, have we ever done a live selfie before? Okay,
I don't think so.
So look out for that on LinkedIn or something. So welcome, Brandon. And as I warned you, we sort of have an initial bit of extremely stream of consciousness, sort of opening bollocks that we just cover whatever's at the top of our head or what we've been up to. Although I'm not sure if we've been up to much. Although we did stay out, we managed to stay out, even though we did 2 pods last week. We stayed out longer than I thought we would on Friday. Mm-hmm. That was a good laugh.
Yeah, not with any guests though.
No, we didn't have any guests. I got some good feedback. One of the things we did. So last week we did 2 podcasts because we had a guy, another American guy who was only in town for the Wednesday, so we accommodated him especially. And then we were going to have another guest on the Friday, and they had to pull out at the last minute, so we kind of had to wing it because we didn't have much material to work from. But what we did was we went over some LinkedIn feedback that Ian has principally got on some of his stories, and that was quite fun, and that sort of whetted my appetite for it. And I'd like our audience to interact with the pod a little bit more. So I got with Pierre's help, I got an AI transcript of the most recent what's it?
AI.
Oh yes, AI. Yeah, haven't you heard that's a big thing these days? I got an AI transcript.
Under 4 minutes in.
Yeah.
That's a record.
Bullshit being, shit, I've got a drink. A transcript and put that on LinkedIn thinking maybe if people can see a written summary of it all, they'll engage. The answer is no, they haven't. You're useless, audience.
That'd be quite
No one is engaged with the last podcast. Come on, raise your game.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
No.
To actually read a transcript of a podcast would be quite an effort.
I thought Yeah.
And there's
It's
a lot
not
of
a transcript. It's a summary. It would take you about a minute to read.
Oh.
But I was just thinking, no one ever engages. We always publish it on LinkedIn. No one ever engages. It's fine. I'm grateful that you listen. Don't get me wrong, audience. But I think it'd be even better if some people who listen to it, even if they told us we're full of shit.
Did the minutes, the sort of little summary, actually manage to make sense of all of our stream of consciousness
It did. Well, what happened was Pierre did a bigger AI summary, which was semi-readable, wasn't it, Pierre? And then I put that one through the AI that we've got here at work called Elysia, and I said, summarize this. And it did, and it came up with reasonably useful bullets. So fair play to Elysia on that. You stepped up to the plate.
It summarised a summary.
Summarised a sort of transcript summary. And as we were joking, you could probably do that ad infinitum. Just keep saying summarise.
Until it's like one word.
Boil it down to a sentence, right?
Yeah, and it just ends up going, it's a fucking podcast. So there we are. So we haven't been up to much else. So I guess we don't need much else in the way of opening bottle. You haven't been out and about? You haven't been on any like visits or press events or anything like that?
No, nothing work related.
We just get straight into it then. So Brandon, why don't I start by asking you, rather than me butchering what you do for a living, why don't you tell us what it is you do at Mavenir?
Okay, I'll butcher what I do for
you
living.
do.
I'll do it. So I really wear three hats, and I run product development for IMS and messaging. So that's kind of the telco proper, our cloud and automation solutions in AI. And what's kind of interesting about the job is I say I'm kind of like trilingual. If you go talk to cloud guys, right, the guys out of IT, they speak a certain language, right? Yeah. And if you go talk to data scientists, they speak a certain language, and the language telco guys speak, right? And if you get them in in a room, they all talk past each other. So a large part of my job is to kind of try to meld telco with cloud and data science.
That's quite a challenge. And I mean, it's massively in the telco's people's. What did I just kick over? It's massively in the telco people's interest to have a translator like you, because it's a cliche of decades that telecoms is sort of slow to move with the times and be all agile in Silicon Valley and all that sort of thing. Absolutely. So they do need to listen to people like you. So listen to him.
So Brandon, are you involved with the kind of core stuff that Mavenir does as well, the kind of packet core? As well?
Okay. Stuff. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff we do in cloud and AI, you can think of it as like a platform where kind of that value prop cuts across all the different product lines. So when we look at developing solutions, you're really trying to develop that value for our entire product set. So we do look at it as kind of a platform play, stretching across all our product lines.
And I guess to people, if there's anyone listening who isn't familiar with Mavenir, I mean, I get the impression the whole time I've known Mavenir that Mavenir's propositions evolved a fair bit over the last decade or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
How would you, again, I won't butcher it, how would you now Emma's really going to put you on the test. Are you going to summarize Mavenir properly? What does Mavenir do?
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say it and then we're going to run it through AI and so we can summarize it better.
You just need an Emma AI.
Emma AI. No, I mean, Mavenir's kind of evolved. I mean, it started kind of as a messaging company, right? We built SMS first, then we got into IMS. Then we got into Packet Core. There's been some M&A activity back and forth. Wouldn't bore you with that. Then we got into RAN, right? We've always been a company that's punching above its weight class, so we've always had to do things different. And one of the things we did different way back when is we decided that we're going to be all software, COTS hardware. That was kind of the first evolution of cloud. And then we started virtualizing workloads. We were ahead of, say, the Nokias and Ericssons of the world, and we had to be, right? And I think we were kind of a disruptive force in the industry because we would go out there and do things first. And we've kept that kind of pedigree or DNA and culture. And even when we get into Open RAN, right, we're going to try and force the market in a different direction. Because the big guys, they just don't have a need to, right? They, like stay the course is in their best interest. Disruption was always in our best interest. And if you're a disruptor, you're always re-innovating and reinventing yourself. So that's why I think you're seeing it's like, you kind of constantly reinventing yourself. And even with Open RAN, the market cooling a little bit like that. I mean, I think this is actually going to bolster us more into the AI space, right? And we've already started on that journey.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough, probably thanks in no small part to Emma, to host panels for the last two Mobile Congresses on Mavenir stand, and they were both on Open RAN, but the more recent one was acknowledging that proposition has evolved, and it's not necessarily exactly what we thought it would be when we first started banging on about it.
Exactly.
And I guess working at Mavenir, you have to be in a constant state of keeping alert to how things are evolving and adapting and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's actually one of the most exciting things about working at Mavenir. It never gets dull, right? They're always pushing new gear. Our CEO, I think he kind of gets bored as stuff gets old. So he's always looking for the next greatest thing and pushing it. But that gives us kind of an environment where we're always looking to innovate, always looking to do things different. And the new stuff really doesn't scare us. I know we kind of talked before the podcast. I think in telco, we're very conservative nature, right? We look at standards. We do what standard says. We don't try to step outside the bounds. Yeah. We're not like a silicon startup. We don't like fail fast. That's not what we do. So, working in
we fail slowly.
Yeah, we fail slowly. That's right. It takes us 5 years to figure out that ain't working, right? Actually, that reminds me. Is I was up talking to this guy in Europe. It was a couple of years ago, and I remember you tell him I was talking to a Verizon guy, and he was like, from concept to us getting the service, it takes us all 4 years. Complaining about how long it is, and the guy was like, "Can you give me his number? I want to see how they do it so fast." It took him 4 years. So, but that's our nature, right? We're very much like we measure 80 times before we cut.
Yeah.
And then right before that cut, we got to measure another 80 times. So we're very risk averse culture.
And part of that is because the infrastructure is so extensive and expensive.
You don't make a mistake.
Yeah, and you can't, and downtime is such a liability that you can see why risk aversion is kind of baked in.
Well, it's baked in because I always say the difference between IT, and this is the cloud side, right? When the cloud guys come in, they're like, why can't we all be cowboys like we are on the IT side? And I go, because when your Java server goes down, you get a little email say we'll be down for 3 hours. Your telco network goes down, you get a call from the government.
Yeah.
Right. So you're talking different levels of risk. Now, with that said, I think the challenge today is that you have to speed up, you have to innovate it. But when we deal with cloud and the AI technologies, one of the things we're always doing is how do we telcoize it, right? How do we bring all that state of the art into telco and get the value that everybody outside of telco is getting with cloud and AI? But make it work for telco means we have to deliver these solutions within telco constraints, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. I just finished a meeting down the street, right, with one of the operators. And we were just talking about using cloud automation, but then it was just like, but how do we do it so it's deterministic? How do we do it so, and then I was kind of explaining the details, how we take the helm charge, pre-post checks, won't bore you with the details, but there's little extra things we have to do inside of these cloud technologies to make them work for telco. And so when we talk about being bilingual or trilingual, it's really like how do we take the best of what's out there in these technologies, recognize the telco constraints, and make solutions that work.
How advanced is that, like the stuff in the core and IMS and that kind of world, like not the RAN where it's much earlier stage, the kind of virtualization, but how it's been around in the core network, I guess, for a lot longer. How advanced would you say it is now? And you're talking about companies like Ericsson and Nokia. When you came along, people were still talking about it all being very much as sort of physical appliances.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But, yeah.
We're at about probably like a fourth or fifth cloud evolution. So if you think about like just going to COTS hardware, remember how that was like revolutionary? We're going to put software on this other COTS hardware, right? And then the second one is like, we're going to virtualize these workloads and share hardware. That's kind of the KVM, VMware days.
Yeah.
Then the first time we were supposed to do lifecycle management automated was the NFV world with OpenStack. Now we have shifted to containers, but we still look at it through a hardware lens. So what everybody did is said, instead of packaging this way, like in a QCOW image, we're now going to package in a container. We're done. Not so fast. What we're really talking to people now is like, yes, we've containerized the workloads. Yes, we've put them in pods, but what we haven't done is taken advantage of all that automation inside the cloud ecosystem. That's what's kind of scaring people today because they don't understand like what does it truly mean to run in a declarative state, GitOps type of operational model. So I've had a lot of conversations even this past week where I go to operators and said, we're not talking about hardware when we're talking about cloud anymore because that's immediately where heads go as telco guys, right? When you think about cloud, that's the hardware the applications run on. I go, we're going to have a cloud discussion. It's an operational transformation type of discussion because now we're talking about automation frameworks based on Kubernetes and all the tooling that goes around that. And it's a completely different way of delivering software, a completely different way of operating. That's what's scary to telcos. But everybody in the world outside of telco is using all this great technology to run their businesses more efficiently. So we have to do it, and we have to learn it, and we have to upskill it.
But they've been quite slow compared with a lot of other organizations.
What are they scared of?
There's the unknown.
Just the unknown.
We've never done it that way before.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, here's your Tesla. We're going to run it down the highway at 120 miles an hour. Now take your hands off the wheel kind of fear.
Right.
In theory, you think it's going to work, but you just never did that before.
Do that.
Exactly. But it's just that. It's just fear of the unknown, right? And it, and even one of the operators was like, "Are we the first ones to do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Okay, that's scary," because they're all I want to let somebody else go.
But
first.
it sounds like other organisations haven't been as scared about making that jump to a containerized world with full automation.
But remember now what we talked about. Even if you make that like, "Oh, I'm going to put one workload in my IT," right? Your business doesn't crater. In telco, all of a sudden, I start changing my operations, and I bring my packet core radio network down. I get a call from the government. That's it's always bumping up against that risk averseness. I always kind of talk about, like, even when cloud and AI, I say all these great ideas come in, and we're like cloud or data science will bounce off of telco is in the operational bloodstream. That's the hardest thing to change in telco. Is people can draw stuff up on a whiteboard, people can plan it, engineer it. But to get it to where the operations guys buy in, because the operations guys are responsible for the network, that's where the rubber meets the road. So every time we've done like a POC or had this great idea, I'm like, you haven't done anything until you got the operations guys using this with a smile on their face. That's the hard thing to do.
Are there effective like telecom sandbox environments where they can really try this stuff out in a low risk way? Yeah,
no, they can. And typically, even if you look at the way telcos bring stuff to market today, they're like, have you tested it? Yes, we've tested it. Then we put it in a lab, they test it. Then they'll run like a FOA, which they call first.
But a lab's a lab. But these labs are obviously designed to try and replicate
real life. Yeah. So the normal pattern is to try this stuff out. Like I said, we test it. The customer tests it. They'll put it in a FOA, which is one site, right, to limit the blast area. They do that. They'll even do that second. They'll call it a SOA. So they normally do this for everything, but just operating at a scale in a different way where their hands are off. And that's it. We're control freaks in telco, right? We like to get our hands in everything, see everything. And so it really is that fear of like, take your hands out, let the thing do it itself. We're not wired to do that. So it's a big culture change for folks to operate and think about it in a different way. And that's the scary. It's just fear of the unknown because we've never been here before.
Yeah, but are they? That you were talking about this sort of 4-stage process where you go through things like OpenStack, which I'm guessing a lot of it's still in use actually. OpenStack, but
most of the people are still there, right?
Yeah,
that's a transition from there to this new.
But in terms of the later sort of containerized world that we're in, how many telcos are already at that point compared with the ones that are still at OpenStack or even pre-OpenStack?
Oh, I think right now we're in that transition period.
Still that, right?
So probably a couple of years ago, we saw everything coming in the greenfield said we're starting out in containers, right? Because if we're starting out new, and now we're starting to see the big brownfield shift where we're now moving to containers. But again, it's not just the container movement. It's now if you're going to use Kubernetes, if you're going to use these GitOps model, if you're going to operate in a different way, now you're changing your operating model. You're no longer just taking workloads and moving them from here to here like you did in the past. You actually have to change the way you operate. And this is a lot of the conversations I'm having with our customers is directly around that. In fact, yesterday, we weren't just talking to the design guys when I was talking to the customer. Their operation folks were in the room. Why? Because we said, like, this cloud journey, this is an operations game as much as it is just we're putting this stuff on new hardware. So we have to start coaching them on what does this mean for your operations, not only the value that it brings, but how should we be thinking about running the lifecycle management of the network? How should we be looking at delivering software? How are the procedures and processes changing? But I know the appetite's there for it. In fact, that meeting I just had up at the street, I just went through a lot of this kind of spiel with all the details. And I was like, what do you think? He's like, our thinking's aligned. We're embarking on that journey. So I think the telcos are very much ready to embark on the journey. They're just very scared about this is a really different way of operating. And so there's a little bit of
the benefits they get from going from sort of like, say, first generation virtualization where it is quite monolithic and it's on OpenStack or whatever, to this kind of containers world that we're in at the moment. I mean, for someone who's not in this deep in the weeds,
I was going to say that. For me,
what is the reason to do it really? What would you see
the container thing? Take us back 5-10 years when we were first talking about it. What's the pitch?
Oh, well, and I use my analogy. I said, like, today you guys are like riding a horse. We're now giving you a rocket ship when it comes to the way you're going to operate these networks. And I say the value prop is pretty simple, right? It comes down to first is operational productivity. Everybody wants to compress those operational schedules. We do a lot of operations in telecom. We security patch, break fix, bring in new features. There's always some reason to spin the network. And we have so much projects backed up, they all have to be shrunken. The other part is real interesting. You hear this in Europe. We don't have a lot of people coming into telecom.
No,
you go.
That's a problem.
Like, I'm sure I'm not going to say our age here, but the customer's making notes. You go, you see this little workshop we had? You see this little workshop? They go, we're all about 50 and over.
Yeah, when you get to any telecom conference, and they're all pretty great haired.
So you think about
we fit in well.
You fit in well. And if you think about it, so we don't have kids coming in.
Yeah.
People are going to retire. So where's the expertise go? Right. So you have to start doing stuff with less hands. And we also find people are fallible. Most of the screw ups in the network are human error. So you want to get the fingers out of the operations, security posture. When we operate with this cloud technology, all the security is automated. Right, we have a front door into the cloud, so that it completely changes where we don't have to have everybody in the cluster anymore. So it's a better security posture. All the secrets and certificates today we upload them manually. Right, we stick them in the software, we stick them into the work. So it's kind of like we're trying to protect the house, but like we'll give the keys in the pocket to the guy that's going up to the house. Right, they're trying to say we want to pull all that security out of the cluster, so you can use things like Vault and Key Factor to fully automate security. And then from a customer experience standpoint, they're like, how do we keep our capacity in rotation, right? So we want to run all this automation so we can make all these changes we need to do in security and fixes and new features without having to take capacity out of rotation. That helps our customers. We don't have to have as much redundant capacity. That saves money, right? And if we can patch faster in security faults, that's the less time we're vulnerable. So there's so many advantages to that. And that's all the cloud stuff, right? But the AI also comes into a lot more efficient operations around them. We have layers of AI on top of what we can do with cloud for service assurance and security, and even taking it to a next level.
So even with the cloud, you can see like a massive efficiency gain.
Absolutely.
Fewer staff needed to do tasks that were needed to be done in the past.
In fact, when we're doing the automation, I kind of have 3 metrics I'm always telling my guys, right? They're rolling out all this automation and go, so how fast is the operation now than it was 6 months ago, right? Went from 6 weeks to 51 hours, want it next week to 40 hours. That. I go, how many steps are you still doing manually compared to last week? And third, how many times do we have to do things twice, right? Rework, right. Because automation is rinse, lather, repeat. It doesn't make mistakes once you get it right.
Oh.
Once you
it doesn't make mistakes.
This is almost the thing that I wrote this morning.
Well, that's the cloud.
Well,
I'm talking about
we can get onto that.
I'm talking about the cloud.
Yeah.
Now the cloud's different. AI can make mistakes because it's non-deterministic.
Yeah.
With cloud, we define a declarative state. The automation gets you in that declarative state, and once you bake the chocolate cake right the first time, automation will get the next 1,000 chocolate cakes. AI is different. AI is like when you want to change the cake recipe. You go, give me a better cake recipe. Then you're dabbling into the unknown a little bit. And that's the big difference between cloud and AI.
Well, and that's also a really important distinction between automation and AI, because until ChatGPT came along at the end of 22, when we were talking about AI, certainly in a telecoms context, we were basically talking about different flavors of automation. At least that was my understanding. And then generative AI comes along, and suddenly, there's a more intuitive interface with machines.
Yes.
And it can sort of mimic thinking in inverted commas. You ask it a question, you compare it to I'm happy to say my age. I'm 53. When I was a kid, we had these shitty little computers like a ZX Spectrum or the one that was in the States, a Commodore 64, that sort of thing. And people would be programming
with the dial-up.
Yeah, with a dial-up with a squeaky modem. And some people would even buy computer mags that had lines of basic code and type it in. And the thing that used to freak them out was this statement that says syntax error, because you got one little punctuation point wrong, and the whole program would freak out. And so, you get the impression that since then, the interface between humans and machines has got more and more sophisticated, more and more intuitive. And then the Gen AI was an inflection point.
Yes.
It seemed to be like a step up. And then now we're talking about agentic AI, which seems to, on some level, and I'm saying this for you to correct me, be like Gen AI on steroids. It's like, you thought Gen AI was clever. Well, this makes Gen AI look like an idiot. Sort of thing.
I don't know. I'm not. Is it? Because it's not.
Because it can take more. It can think in inverted commas more. That's all I mean.
It's not changing the actual paradigm of AI, though. Like the whole thing about generative AI and building a large language model and throwing all this processing power at it, you've not come up with something that you're doing differently to produce agentic AI, as far as I'm aware.
Right.
You're just deploying. You're just deploying it in a different way.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean by it's on steroids.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, what's happening in AI? It's evolving. New capabilities come out, right? And you're right. With Gen AI, And if you think about it, like take a step back a little bit, right? And you say like AI's been in our lives for a long time.
Yeah.
Like,
in some form or other.
Yeah, like the 2010s. Like I wouldn't have gotten here if not for Google Maps. They've been using AI forever, right?
Yeah.
If I'm listening to a
arguably
song on
since
Spotify, Netflix, AI.
Since the search engine came along in the first place, you could call that AI.
If you look at AWS, right? They say we've been using AI for over 25 years for personal recommendations.
Yeah.
And you know that stuff works pretty good because my wife buys a lot of stuff through AWS. So I know that AI is working.
Tell me about it, mate.
Yeah.
Barely a day goes by when something doesn't arrive at my house.
Exactly. Well, let me tell you how bad it is, right? I got so much stuff coming to my house. My wife has a snack cart. She puts out for the delivery drivers every day. That's how much crap I got coming in. I kid you not. I'm going to start filling it with beers.
So
you guys got the right idea.
So it's very good. I mean, we used to, that form of AI we used to call the algorithm or something like that. But it's a form of empowering machines to appear to be using their initiative in some way.
Exactly.
And that's all I'm getting to with agentic, is it feels like this is the latest iteration. The reason it's called agentic is you can not just ask it a question or do a complicated search, or even like Dean described to us once, get it to write a whole research paper. Yeah. This time you just go, look, just fucking take care of that. I'm going to the pub.
But it almost sounds like
deals with it.
I mean, we had Ros Roseborough, I think, on recently, and she was saying it almost just sounds like a rebranding of what we used to call intent-based networking. You know, you set it's declarative, and you set a task, and then software carries out a series of steps, and the steps are the bits of agentic AI.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
if you think about what the Gen AI model does, right? You give it a prompt, and what it did is it predicted the next token, right? It's not really thinking through. The move to agentic AI was you give it an objective. So that objective, like you can put it in math, it'll minimize some function. There's reward functions you could put in. So there's a little math spin in there. Am I on the right path or wrong path? And so with agentic AI, it's giving that little bit extra than LLM, saying that you can take action. You can look at your environment, understand the response to that environment, and you see, am I getting off, closer or farther away from my objective, and you make adjustments. That's kind of what the agents do. And there's been agents around for a while that have that design pattern. And then the other thing in agentic AI is the idea that people found, like large language models, if you just see these big monoliths, they don't work as well as if you give them subtasks. So instead of having one brain to say, you do everything, you say, you just take care of this task, you take care of this task, you take care of this task.
So it's a small language model.
Yeah. Well, this whole concept of distillation, right?
Yeah.
Remember the whole thing is like bigger models are better, more parameters, more data. And then they started saying, but you know what? We can actually take those big models to train smaller models and be just as effective, distillation. So this is a whole new thing that came out.
Partly to do with specialization as well?
Yeah,
like if you're trying to build
absolutely.
a model for a telco, you don't want to put in loads of information about Jane Austen or something.
You don't need to. It's a waste of time. I've always said, and Emma laughs at me when we say, you don't need to shoot a mosquito with a bazooka, which sometimes you're just trying to get a simple task done. You don't need a big LLM to do it.
It'd be a laugh to try, though, wouldn't it? To shoot a mosquito with a
I thought about it when I said it.
You
it's like, would you
might
hit
not
it?
notice whether you've hit it. That's the problem.
That
It's not very satisfying.
As soon as the wind
I
came
blew
out,
up a house
it would
instead.
the wind would probably blow it away. I thought about it, but I don't think I can make it work. Shotgun, maybe.
Yeah,
Enough pellets to get it as it's
back to the drawing board. Part the bazooka,
right.
lads. This is overkill. For me, when we get onto agentic and some of the things you were describing, and and Ian quite rightly said, it feels like a step forward from intent based and that sort of thing. It's this incremental increase that leads me inevitably in a sort of dystopian direction. And I think where we are now, you made a great case in a short amount of time, and I'm sure you could go on in much greater depth if we dared you to. But there comes a point where you're handing over more and more control, and this presumably is one of the things that you're talking about. Sometimes you speak to telcos and they freak out a little bit.
Right.
You're handing over more and more control. You're getting the machines to make more and more decisions, or at least that's the appearance, because that's what agentic is saying.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Agentic, there's one thing, the way you just described it is you give it a task and it just stays on task. There's a whole subset of dealing with AI, which is the questions that you give it, the prompts you give it, and whether there could be ambiguity. Like, let's say you say to something, make sure my beer's always filled up. And then the dystopian sort of Terminator-y thing is it then starts attacking anyone that goes anywhere near my beer or something like that. So it's like defining those parameters. And where I get dystopian, I might introduce Ian's story he wrote today at this moment. Where I get dystopian is just it's just that control thing. It's the same pushback we always used to have when we used to talk about the public cloud in the telecoms context, where you've got someone like whoever, BT, if the vast majority of the infrastructure is in an AWS or Microsoft or Google cloud, then they've necessarily relinquished some control. It's not in their physical possession.
I don't think
still
it's just
true.
a control thing.
No, but I'm just saying that's one of the
the,
that's one of the things that freaks me out. So is this a good time for me to?
Yeah,
I think we should get it. It's a good topic.
Because this is very relevant to what I wrote this morning and what we were talking about before we came on, I think.
Let me quickly say, before you go on, you wrote a story which I'm referring to called AI in Telecom is the path to a dull dystopia.
Yeah, because
Sounds like a contradiction in terms almost, but there we go.
Yeah, well, it's the I think the Skynet's mentioned in the story.
Yes, I saw that.
It's not machines.
I smiled.
It's not machines running around like bumping everybody off. It's just that they're doing everything and we're not anymore.
Yeah, that's what you mean by dull
I think I
dystopia.
started off saying you get these anecdotes about, when they sort of get people out of retirement because they know how to do things that other people don't. Like there's some old bit of tech to do with frame relay or something that they need to do something with, and the only guy who knows how to do it anymore is 70 years old and retired. There's all these anecdotes about people, sort of, even C++ programmers now, because everybody's using Python or whatever. They kind of get, they kind of get saved from their sort of retirement years and asked to come out. And
is Python like a sort of
Python
simpler
abstracts
veneer?
a lot more away than
I
C++,
see, right.
as far as I'm
My
aware.
son's learning
Don't-
These a lot of Python and AI,
Yeah.
Golang, just new coding languages that are out there, but that happens.
Yeah.
But the more that you kind of do that sort of abstraction or get AI to do a lot of the kind of fundamentals that were done by people, the less reason there is to train people to do those tasks. So if you do, this is one of the things about automation that's been going on for telco in a long time, is that if you get people who used to do trouble ticketing and jobs that kind of get dismissed really as sort of drudgery out of the way, and you use automation tools or AI to do that instead, then you don't train anybody to do that anymore. And if the path carries on the way it's going, eventually it'll get to the point where you really only have a very sort of high level of coders who are doing a lot of this stuff, and the rest of it's handled by AI, which all sounds very well until potentially something goes wrong. And then it's like, well, nobody really knows how to. I mean, a more sort of prosaic example that someone who doesn't deal with telecom might understand is reliance just on ChatGPT to do things like essay writing. I think kids
or journalism.
Even before that, because we at least learned how to think critically. But if you're a school kid these days, and I've heard several people say this week even, so I don't know if all of a sudden people are starting to get a bit alarmed about this. And I know my own kids are encountering ChatGPT and using that in a way that you would never have done in the past. And I worry about the impact just on basic writing ability.
Yeah,
if you lie on the sofa all day long, your leg muscles kind of like atrophy.
I can confirm
If you don't use your brain to work out how to structure an essay, and you're using ChatGPT to do it instead, your brain will turn to mush.
And they've already talked about that, where even like the Gen Zers, because they the way they text and the way they consume, they don't know how to write sentences anymore. They don't do handwriting. They're losing like a 5,000-year-old skill set, which is basic communication through writing and critical thinking. And you're right.
I know.
So if you're letting these things think for you, right, you're going to lose that skill set. Now, the thing about telecom we told before that was kind of like they like to put guardrails on everything, right? When you do give an objective, and we've done this type of stuff, the guardrails are pretty tight. We've used like agentic AI, not in the systems we talked about. We used something called DQ reinforcement learning, where we gave it a goal, but we gave it only a few knobs to control. We didn't say like, hey, you can touch everything. We're going to give you these 3 knobs. So for now, right? But I do think that when we kind of put these systems out there, you still need people to run them. You still need people to train them. Because I always said, like, how does chess beat a chess champion? Somebody's got to train it to play chess in the first place. If there was never anybody playing chess, the AI doesn't learn. Somebody has to.
But it can be
teach the
historical.
systems.
I mean, a lot of how LLMs work is they just tap into all the historical information.
Yeah, all the internet data.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I've heard this was one of the best analogies I've heard. They say LLMs are like a freshly minted PhD student, book smart as hell. Yeah. But go ask it to solve the problem that only a 20-year-old vet would know. Not there. Because if you think about it, once you go outside the LLM's knowledge set, like take like Claude or something like that, and it goes, I've been trained since 2024. Go ask it a fact that happened last week. It goes, I don't know.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have access to that data, or it's not refreshed, or it hasn't been trained, or it doesn't have the ability to go out and get it, it doesn't know. It's limited in its data set. And I've always said the hardest thing to do in AI right now, even in telco, is train that AI to think like a telco domain expert.
Yeah.
And so telco domain expertise is absolutely critical. There will be no AI system built, right, for AI without telco. I'm convinced of that. We started doing AI projects and we started doing with data science. They couldn't get anywhere until we brought the telco guys in, because the telco guys, they knew the use case, they knew the problem statement, they knew the data that was relevant, and they were the ones that could tell you whether it was crap or not with the answer coming out.
But those guys might not be around in the future, and unless we replenish the workforce, and you've got to start somewhere. I mean, the point was made to me, I think he's quoted in the story actually, the last time I met him, which is a year and a bit ago, Tarek Amin, who's been in the news a lot lately.
Yeah, we know Tarek, yeah.
So the last time I interviewed him was at MWC last year when he was still at Aramco rather than this new AI thing.
Oh, he's doing the AI thing, right.
And he was chatting about the... he was actually talking about the ethics of it. Which is kind of, we can debate that, but he was talking about the ethics of it from like his kids, he said, if he was asked these days to advise them what to go into, he wouldn't advise them to go into coding, because actually 80% to 90%, I think he said, of what you can do can be done by the...
Danielle said that on our MWC pod as well.
And it's like, if the AIs can do the coding, then we don't train people up to do any coding. And it's all very well for the senior coders to go, oh, well, a lot of the stuff that they were doing is just drudgery.
The low-level coding.
But that's what you start doing. It's like, playing scales on a piano or something. Like you have to get through that to become a coder. So if you don't see a need for it, and you don't replenish that workforce, and you don't train people, then what happens to them? You don't have them entering the workforce. And then these domain experts in the future just aren't there anymore. So the AI is going to have to make do with self-referencing itself or
and that's the thing, like not having, like even when we do it on security products today, right? We still have the fraud analysts, they train the models. But when the models come up and say, this looks like fraud, we still have the human in the loop. There's still a lot of the human in the loop just from that. And here's the other thing. When I mentioned, guys at telco, they want to be very deterministic, right? And the cloud is deterministic. That's why they're embracing cloud more, because if we said, look, this is the declarative state we want, we're just going to let automation get there. Like, this is the cake we're going to bake. Yeah. Automation is going to bake this cake. People are like, I don't care. No, that's fine. AI by its nature is non-deterministic, which means it comes up with an answer based on a probability distribution. So the job is not to come up with the right answer, it's to come up with the best answer. And the reason it comes up with the best answer is because you want it to say, I want to give you enough flexibility. So if I get new data at you, you can learn, you can adapt. If I give you a situation you've never seen before, you can come up with the best answer. And if you work in a probability distribution, you may find new stuff and come up with novel optimization strategies. So I think AI is a very powerful tool to extract information in new ways out of the data that we otherwise didn't do. But a lot of the automation stuff I leave to cloud. But I also say, when you get that non-deterministic, that's what'll scare people. Because I'm like, then they go, how do you put the guardrails on it?
Totally.
You want the creativity. You don't want the stupidity. That's a balance.
Another thing that occurs to me in terms of the equilibrium, that the synergy between humans and machines in this AI era is... It used to be a phrase like in the 70s and 80s or something where it says you don't get fired for buying IBM.
Yeah.
And
or Nokia Ericsson, as we say.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the telecom equivalent.
That's the telecom equivalent. There we are. Yeah, that must be something that you have to combat.
Oh, we do all the time.
And the reason being, the purpose of it, whichever company it applies to, is like, well, they're the market leader. How was I to know it was going to be shit? Because they're the market leader. Right. And so that's
just say everybody else does it.
Yeah, so it sort of covers your ass. It's like, well, everyone else does it. They're the market leader. How was I supposed to know it to be shit? And I wonder whether we're going to get to a stage with AI where we're consulting AI very frequently. We might tell ourselves it's just a sanity check. Like, I'm 99% sure I'm going in this direction. I'm just going to check in with AI, see what it's got to say. And it goes, nah,
totally.
Scott, you took your shit, mate. You want to go here. And then you could either do you don't get fired for buying IBM and go, well, the AI said it, and you're always going on about how fucking clever the AI is, so I just went along with it. Or you go against it, and you go, nah, and then your thing goes wrong. And then there's some kind of paper trail that says the AI told you not to do it. And so then you're in a double amount of shit with your boss. So it could lead to some real difficult dilemmas
if you wanted
decision making.
Validity about something, like to sanity check something in the past, like pre-2000, let's say, you go and talk to some expert, and he's the world's leading authority on this bit of information, and also his colleague says the same thing.
Yeah. Well, you do an investment and you say, well, Warren Buffett bought it.
Nowadays, you go, well, look, Google said it.
Yeah.
Well, if Warren Buffett does it, man, you got to go down that path.
Well, he's retiring now.
But he's a good example of someone that is a human being.
Yeah,
He's
he does it.
Like he does a good job as a human being.
He's not
making investment
excessively
choices.
quant in his stuff. He actually uses a bit of intuition and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's another thing. But I wanted to sort of revert it back. We're bound to go back down in a dystopian, it's all a bit too scary way, because that seems to be the way we're
going to go the Terminator route.
That's what journalists do.
We've touched on it. The only reason we don't do it more is because it's so hackneyed on this pod. It happens so often. Pierre even went through a time of just putting on that little Terminator dum on the little trailers.
It's self-aware.
Yeah, self-aware.
You could have AI doing the podcast, right?
Yeah.
This is what we worry about.
We could put our voices through
terrible.
a Schwarzenegger AI filter.
You think AI could do? I don't think AI could do what Scott does.
No.
Impossible.
Could do what I do.
I like the inference that
do what I do,
what Ian does. No, we've had this chat actually. I mean, I'll stay on that tangent, seeing as you seem to have invited me to. The authenticity. So that's a big one. We're always going to deal with people. We're all going to get out to the pub after. That we can't replace that.
Absolutely. Good thing.
And just talking to normal human beings and doing human stuff. We're not going to stop wanting to interact with humans. So I think there will be a natural threshold at which point people go, hold on a fucking sec, I need to actually talk to an organic human being. Obviously, you can get a bit Blade Runner-y.
There might be a natural threshold, but that doesn't change the fact that we might be incredibly reliant on something, and the actual guts of the technology, nobody really understands how it works anymore because AI does that.
Oh, yeah, I'm not discounting that at all. I think that's a point well made.
So then you've got two ways of looking at that. One is, well, we don't really need to worry about that anymore because the AI takes care of it. But then you're assuming that AI is infallible. And
that's the mistake. Yeah.
Well,
so is it? Yeah. So
how are you doing for beer, by the way, bro?
Well, Microsoft.
I mean, a Sam Altman would go.
I'm going to give you another, and that'll force you to drink faster.
It does.
A Sam Altman or an Elon Musk.
You give me a dress with that if I'm not drinking fast enough. Is that where it's going?
We just start giving you some peer pressure. See, AI couldn't do that. AI would be, it's fine, Brandon. You drink at your own pace.
It's socially
Whereas human beings are like, come on, raise your game, son.
Exactly. It would have that safety mechanism. You can't force beer on the lab.
Ian was trying to make a point.
Sorry.
If you guys want to talk about beer, I can leave and meet
Sorry,
someone.
Ian.
No, I was just saying if Sam Altman or Elon Musk would probably say that AI is a better problem solver than any human can be. I mean, we might have AGI in the future if OpenAI has its way, but that's a big step to take for the human race to suddenly go. I mean, that really is a ceding of control and ultimate responsibility if you get to that point. And if nobody really understands the guts of the technology anymore, which I think is a problem pre-AI. Actually, I think there's an increasing. It's like a sort of archaeological dig, isn't it?
Yeah. Any layer of abstraction.
Right? The kind of core fundamentals of physics and engineering.
Yeah.
How many people these days really come through? I mean, if we had to sort of an apocalypse situation and we had to get sort of basic things up and running again, just to sort of restart society, how many people really understand the fundamentals? How much of it, envisage yourself in 50 years' time, maybe, where AI is far more advanced than it is now. Probably a lot of people aren't really going to understand how the world works anymore. Far fewer will understand the basic things that keep society humming than did, say, 100 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I even think...
And I find that's quite scary.
I think it's scary. I think it started even with social media, right? I think the way we even consume information.
Totally.
You remember back in the day when you had to sit there and read a paper, right? I mean, you could... how many times can people really sit there for 2 hours, concentrate on something and go through it, right? And I mean, really engage, because what they say is it takes about 20 minutes to re-engage your brain if you're deep in thought working on a problem. How many people really sit there and engage for more than 20 minutes? I mean, Gen Z, and I'm looking at my kids, because there's so much information thrown at them, they don't take the time to stop and think and critically think. And the writing, I think, is going away too. Right? They lose that skill to communicate and write. And, we kind of talk about going out to the pub for beer and stuff, but there's communication skills, and, that are so important. And, we had this technology day workshop, right? We do today, we're working with these guys all the time, but it's interesting. It's over Teams. Remember the COVID era?
Yeah.
And I was just kind of thinking back, I got to see these guys I work with all the time, but it's that hallway conversation. It was having the beers afterwards, that information that you normally wouldn't get in that sterile environment was coming out, and it was that back and forth, and there was so much value in that human interaction, face to face, not even through Teams.
Yeah.
But that true face to face interaction is when you really,
that's
sometimes
why
stuff gets real.
That's why we always do the pod in the studio. We could get loads more guests if we did it over Zoom.
It wouldn't be the same.
No, it wouldn't
but
be the same.
being here, the beer is a sort of cosmetic part of it, though it's increasingly become a core feature of it. But it's just the non-verbal body language, the fact that, especially when there's three of us, you can tell who wants to speak next because they have a certain sort of characteristic, and to shut up and let them finish,
evidently
or not, or evidently not.
Or you steamroll it.
Unless it's Ian, and then you just ignore him because he's probably going to talk shit.
I get you, Ian. I get you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Pierre.
Can you cut off people's
our
mics
producer.
Yeah.
Yeah, just,
But your point, that pod thing, there's authenticity, and obviously you couldn't. I think we're a very long way, if ever, from a sort of Blade Runner-y thing where you genuinely can't tell whether a machine is a machine or not.
Yeah, I do
Turing
think that,
test.
but I also think not enough questions are being asked about the sort of ethics side of it. I think in the sort of race for everybody to have AI as part of their business plan, and every government to want to be an AI leader. I mean, the UK got disparaged. The last UK government got sort of laughed at for wanting to be a kind of leader in AI regulation. Why are they so worried? They're so risk averse, thinking about regulation.
Europe's pretty cute,
and
well.
now Keir Starmer, in all of his wisdom, has decided that he's not really interested in being a leader in AI regulation. He just wants to be a leader in AI like everybody else. And let's throw caution to the wind and let's just go for it.
Well, and then you get the geopolitical thing, which we've spoken about before, which is as soon as someone goes, hold on a sec, can we just pause for breath here? Someone else will go, yeah, but fucking China's not pausing for breath.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Unless we do it, China will be ahead of us, so we have to do it.
Well, and it's like financial markets. Why would we ever regulate anything? Whatever bad's happened from that.
Yeah,
exactly. No, it's the same thing, and so you get this kind of stampede towards it, and a lot of the questions I think were still being asked a few years ago. I mean, I remember writing about this back in 2015, 2016, like not that long after I joined Light Reading, and people were answering questions very differently then than how they are now even. I mean, we might get onto BT at some point, but I think it's quite interesting that when he used to ask telcos about automation and AI, what impact it would have on the workforce, they were very wary of saying we see kind of workforce shrinkage resulting from it. They're very
awful because they didn't want you to write some article about how they're sacking everyone.
Well, and I'm glad that I did, because nowadays they don't even seem to hesitate to say. I mean, I was amazed this week with the BT conference call that Simon Louth almost said it's because of all this stuff we're doing in AI that we can make a massive difference to headcount in the next few years. He didn't quite put it that way. That's paraphrasing him. But there was a quote, I think that's in that story you were looking at, where it's a long one though, but he's basically talked about all the stuff they're doing on transformation. And they're incredibly, Simon Louth, BT CFO, they're incredibly aggressive on workforce reduction. It's not all to do with AI. I mean, they're building fibre and they won't need those people in the future, obviously, because it'll be built. But the targets that Philip Yancey, who was the predecessor to Alison Kirkby as CEO. Oh, by the way, it is Kirkby, because someone got told off for pronouncing it Kirby on the...
It's Kirkby.
Yeah.
She goes, the K's there for a reason.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake.
She's basically stuck with the target set by her predecessor, and he did an interview, I think it was with The Guardian, where he said, 10,000 jobs at least will go to do with generative AI in the next few years.
So I want to... before we move on to other stuff, we've had a big old tangent, but I want to bring it back to some of the more telecoms-y stuff, more stuff to do with your day job, Brandon.
Sure.
One of the ways in which I've seen AI framed in a telecoms context is I think Nokia was using this at their Mobile World Congress thing, but I've heard other people use it. There's various qualifiers. There's AI on RAN, AI for RAN, AI with RAN, AI fucking about with RAN, or whatever.
Overran, under.
Oh, the RAN stuff.
Yeah, exactly. To do RAN. Can you...
And I ran. Sorry.
yeah, there's so many little puns. I'm going to rant to you.
Flock of seagulls.
Can you just demystify a little bit of that? Some of the ways in which AI is being positioned or is being sold to the telecoms industry along the lines of what I was just going on about?
Yeah, that's a great question to cut through the noise. So the way I look at it is that there's certain areas where AI is going to fit well, right? The area of customer service, I mean, if you think about what AI is kind of used out in the wild, a lot of people say, hey, why don't I have these agents, right? They're responding to calls or stuff. So if you look at T-Mobile's announcement with OpenAI with September, right? They're going to build this thing called, what is it, Context something or other. And the whole idea is like, hey, let's partner so we can have inbound, so the inbound callers, we now have AI systems and they can do stuff like go back, get historical chats. They can, get some information about that caller real time, about their plans, maybe what's going on in the network, personalized service. So service personalization for an inbound customer type of call, and it's kind of personalization is something AI already does. Spotify, Netflix, right? We're already using it for inbound. So, that area of customer care. And then what Verizon's doing, right? They put it out in the marketplace where they said, hey, we're going to build agents, right, for small businesses. So we're going to get in the other side, not use it ourselves in this case, but we can go sell it to small businesses and give them a little AI on texting, right? Make our services better. So I think that customer service experience is one. I think there's a whole area you've heard of autonomous networking, right? The TM Forum comes out and they'll have the little elevator, my 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. Well, that gets to some of the agentic AI within telco, doesn't it?
The agentic AI. Yeah. Now, autonomous networking has a big part of cloud in it. Like I just talked about all that automation stuff that cloud's really, really good at. And we don't need AI to do what cloud does because it just does a fantastic job. But things like service assurance where you try to figure out things from information that are not so obvious. So AI will be great in service assurance domain. It's good for network optimization, like reading complex traffic patterns and right-sizing the resources, right? We tend to overbuild in the network because we're like, if I may need it, I'm going to throw all that capacity and power at it.
Big capacity.
Yeah. So right-sizing the network resources deployed for a specific service demand, that's a great area for AI. The other is like KPI optimization. We started using AI for RAN KPI optimization because when you started looking at the problem, it was whole complex. In fact, when I talked about that agentic AI one, I was talking to my data science, the PhD guy's really smart. I'm like, so you're giving it 3 knobs to control, and each of them has a discrete value. So like this can do 6 things. I go, so what's it doing? He goes, all the unique combinations, if you just take up from those 3 parameters, it's 120 to the power of 9th. So what we're training the AI to do is figure out what is the best combination out of 129 combinations to figure out. And I'm just sitting here going like, that really blew my mind because I go, that makes sense. How the hell would a human
That's
ever
why you
do
need
that?
these data centers the size of whales to do all the processing and
processing.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff around that autonomous networking where AI is going to be able to crunch this massive amounts of data that is in telco and come up with novel optimization strategies. In fact, when we deployed it, it outperformed what our best guys on the field could do by 41% in tuning the network. It was just able to crunch so much more data and figure out that combination.
And that all seems like a no-brainer to me.
That's a no-brainer. And that autonomous
Although I think no-brainer is an increasingly unfortunate phrase to use, isn't it, when we're talking about
we don't use our brains.
It might be a no-brainer, but yeah, exactly.
And then I think another big area is in security. AI is great at detecting patterns. And fraud is nothing but patterns, right? Fraud guys use the same patterns. You pick up fraud. Like even if you want to pick up, is somebody a credit risk, not a credit risk? Pattern matching, right? So AI is great at pattern matching. And then we use it internally. I think this is a good place to say, using it for things like improving our documentation, improving our coding. I think the moonshot is like, yes, we'll have it be writing new telecom products, years down the road. Yeah. But initially just doing a productivity enhancement. Because even if I look at how a product documentation is done today, we get a requirement. We write a feature spec. That feature spec has to connect to a design document. Then it goes to a test plan. Then you code, comes back to release notes, update. There are just so many things that are just kind of mundane type of stuff where people like, I got to make sure that paragraph and that paragraph and that paragraph, we can put our people's, time to better use than that type of stuff. So I do think that Gen AI, it doesn't need to take over what people do, but it can actually do some of the mundane jobs that we can get people doing more important stuff.
Well, I think the really scary stuff is what you mentioned, I think, is if you get AI doing R&D. That to me is...
Yeah, and
like
so you don't
fundamentally making a big difference.
How can AI have a eureka moment? Sort of thing?
AI having a eureka moment in R&D and let's say coming up with a 6G technology that no human possibly could.
But
what if it did though?
Well,
then it'd be like, shut up, AI did it, and humans didn't.
What if it cracks fusion?
Yeah, but what we're like, and we've done a lot of these AI things, and I kind of got a little deep, with our data scientists and how this works. Like even when we were training to do that one use case, they were saying, oh, our model, it's math underneath the model's brain, and that math is telling it what to do in a very narrow construct, right? It's saying, I want you to maximize the reward function for this specific task with this. So it was very constrained. So I looked at it and said, that is a massively complex problem that is beyond our monkey brains as human to ever crunch that amount of data and come up with that result.
Yeah.
But it's a very narrow use case because it's only got these parameters and it's focused specifically on that piece. And I'm like, that made sense to me to say we can do a lot more of that.
That's the viewing of it as a big calculator, basically.
A big calculator,
Yeah.
a big calculator. But if you look at AI, said there's some very practical problems that are beyond what humans can do.
Yeah.
But they're narrow in scope, so they're not taking over our job. To me, that's a great place to start with AI, is that go solve a problem you can't solve today with your brains. But you don't have to start replacing people. Because remember I talked about, like, even we started looking at, like, if I replace an L1 guy, right? And everybody goes, oh, we can replace an L1 guy. That's easy. But we started looking at everything they do, right? And we're like, oh my God, all the workflows you have to build. And it's not like all the complexity. It was just the sheer amount of workflows and automation you have to build. And I go, but is really that the hill to die on? Or do we want AI solving the problems we can't solve? Because I kind of look at cloud today as the arms and legs and say, man, we can put all this automation in the network and do a bunch of stuff and get efficiency. But where do we need to elevate our problem solving and decision making and apply AI there to help out our guys? Like, there's no way I'm going to have one of my techs look at 1,500 rows of data every 15 minutes, make a change every 15 minutes, and then try to pick that needle out of the haystack for the purpose combination. I mean, you can't comprehend that. That is a perfect place for AI. Or a data, fraud analyst. Do I really need to manually crunching through data and looking for a fraud pattern, or we crunch it through AI?
Can I just ask, because you were talking about cloud and automation and the savings, but where, I mean, it's like pretty basic question, but where do the savings come from really with cloud and being able to automate? Because I guess a lot of people would say, well, yeah, if you move it off premises, then you're not having to have IT people on site looking after stuff, and there's the obvious savings, but and you don't have to have equipment that are bought. But is there something, I mean, where does it come beyond that, this sort of idea that cloud is necessarily a kind of
that's a good
reduction
question.
in manual effort?
Because when I talk about cloud, I cover both on-premise as well as public, right?
Yeah.
And where I think the savings are coming is not whether I park my workloads in the public cloud and I'm paying AWS money, or I'm paying Red Hat and Dell on-premise. Where I think the savings are going to coming from is the efficiency in operations, right? I can do more, right? So if I'm able to output more network operations in less time with less people, less error, I have productivity gains.
Yeah.
I've been looking at it internally, right? We only have so many people. The customers want us to do more than we got gas in the tank to do, always. It's always like, hey, Brandon, here's your 20 gallons of water. Here's your 10-gallon bucket. Make it work. I mean, that, and everybody in telco is talking about that. They got more work than they got budget to do. They got more work than they got people to do, and no one's doing people. So everybody's looking for productivity. Like, even if I could do what I do today, right, but I can make the timelines I really need to meet and the cost budgets I need to meet, we need solutions. And we're not even talking about replacing people. We're just talking about rolling out networks in 6 weeks instead of 6 months.
Yeah, but I know you said on premises, and I know some people would sort of think that saying on premises and cloud is a bit of an oxymoron. I think I was with a meeting with, she's left now, but Harmeen Mehta when she was at BT and she was sort of CIO. She described, like, even private cloud, which might have a different sort of connotation than on premises. She was sort of saying, like, I think she said it was fake mist. You know, this idea that an on-premises thing can really be the cloud is, because for a lot of people, I guess the idea of the cloud is almost synonymous with the internet, isn't it? It's a few big data centers. You move your IT stuff there,
I see.
and you don't have it on premises anymore.
I see where you're going in. Yeah. And when you're talking about it in the context of that, public cloud is like the public transportation system, right? Yeah. It's the model that, like, we're all sharing resources, so it's more efficient. Yeah. But if you have a private cloud, that's like you own your car, right? Type of thing. But I go, again, that's through the hardware construct. I said, do I want to park on infrastructure I own, or do I want to park in public cloud that's shared, and my cost savings come through that? What I've been educating people about, this is operational transformation. Whether you're using GitOps and all those techniques I talked about, that declarative automation, whether you use it on-prem.
GitOps?
Oh, GitOps. Okay. I should define that.
That's all right. That's what I'm here for, is to force you to dumb things down a bit.
Yeah.
For me, if for no one else.
Okay. So here's my analogy. So the way we do things, like, say I want my kid to clean the pool, right? And I said, okay, this is what I want you to do, Ian. I need you to go empty the skimmer. I need you to go brush that, put chemicals in here, and I can give them a laundry list of stuff to do. And when we've automated before right? We call that imperative automation. I can have someone to automate that, but it's a one and done shot. And I just say, like, I know exactly what you do and I tell you to do. So whether I have him do it or a robot do it, we automate through that way. When we moved to Kubernetes and GitOps automation, I hand him a picture of the pool and I said, I want you to make the pool look like that. I'm not going to tell you all the different steps to do.
Picture of a pristine pool.
Picture of a pristine pool.
Before and after.
Yeah,
this is the shithole I've got now.
No, and make it look like this. and so what these automation frameworks do, they take that declarative state that you defined, they look at the actual state, and they bring them into compliance. So it's kind of like I got my crap pool with all the seaweed in it, growing in it, over, and I show them that pristine pool, and I go, make that
into that
look like that. And I don't care how you do it. And so
that's the I don't care how you do it bit where I get a bit spooked.
That's the concept of this declarative automation. And this is what's freaking some of the guys out. They're like, wow, that's a wholly different way to operate, because we're used to having to bring out loads of people and like brush the pool and clean the pool and throw chlorine in the pool and everything. So moving that declarative state of operation, whether it's on-prem or it's in a public cloud, that still holds. And that's a much more efficient model. So when we develop software, I said, we're not looking at developing software. We're looking at delivering automation artifacts, which is our job is to create that picture of the pool that we want that automation framework to make. And we want that pool picture to be right, so the automation does the right thing. Because I always tell my guys, you can't automate broke. So your job is to get the picture right and make it work. And you think about how efficient that is, says your job is just now making pictures, not telling everybody every step to do.
So whenever new technology comes along that threatens to make humans obsolete, and that's obviously very germane to the AI discussion. Yeah. Some people go all the way back and go, well, we created tractors and people found something else to do instead of using a fucking ox or something. And there's always that obsolescence thing, and you get called a Luddite if you push back on it. But I guess one whole new area of human expertise is going to be that interface, being the primary interface with the AI, with the machine.
Absolutely.
And asking the right sorts of questions. Because that won't necessarily be obvious.
If you do it well enough, you could spend your whole afternoon drinking beer and, only work for an hour a day.
I'm trying to give the sort of utopians the benefit of the doubt that we go, no, you won't just say, you won't just wake up in the morning and go to the AI, do my job for me today. I'm going out on an all day fucking bender. What you'll do is that you'll be like 100,000% more productive with AI as your sort of tool. What you will produce?
Imagine how much more productive we are now with computers.
Yeah,
rather than writing on paper.
And look at things like technology. Like 30 years ago, we couldn't have done this podcast because there was no capacity to record it.
I don't agree with that.
Go on then.
I don't agree with this. I hate this. People have always found things to do. Look at earlier phases of automation. Just because something has always happened doesn't mean it's always going to carry on happening. And I think what we're talking about with AI is a fundamental shift from what Pierre just said. A computer is still a tool where you're actually having to think. The words that you're coming up with are not being invented by the computer. Is not doing the writing, it's making it quicker for you to type. So it's relieving some of the actual manual effort of putting down.
I don't know about you, I hate all the grammar check in Word.
Email took a lot of jobs from post offices,
It did, yeah. And I'm not saying that automation and mechanization before it didn't take jobs. They did, of course they did. Hence the Luddite movement and everything. They've all taken jobs, but I think with AI, one of the results of that is to actually push people to do more white collar work, and a huge increase in the number of people going to universities to do white collar roles rather than sort of jobs that used to happen. If AI comes along and does the cognitive stuff as well, and the stuff that we've always thought, machines can never do that because it's a creative thing, and that's like the final frontier. It's very hard to see where people go after that. There isn't another final frontier.
I was just like,
I know you were.
Well,
I think it was wrong to ask it.
But I always think there's an unknown. There's always a disruption. Right? If you look at Netflix, I still remember when I used to get DVDs down at Blockbuster, right? I mean,
Netflix started as a mail order DVD thing.
Mail order, and then all of a sudden now you get it to like they shifted to the the internet and streaming and stuff. They reinvented themselves. So there's always been when technology takes over something, I think there's always been a reinvention of stuff. Now the question is, what does that look like? Right? That's a valid point. We don't know.
And it's hard to see.
Hard to see where it lands. Yeah, but even we talked about what Scott did about. Or the computer, which Pierre was doing, like even when you're using a large language model today, just like, you can give everybody the same computer. Do they write the same paper? You can give, we could have the same large language model. I could get a prompt engineer in here and say, okay,
Yeah.
Ian Brandon, Mr. Prompt Engineer, which I pay a buttload of money, by the way, say, go try to get this result out of an LLM and give us the exact same LLM. That prompt
So
engineer
there
will
are
get a much...
prompt
yeah.
engineers are people who just come up with the ways.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. I
that's
didn't
exactly
know the
what
job
they
title,
do.
but that's what I was
they
just
do.
alluding to, where your whole job
That's
is
exactly...
to get the
I
best.
reckon my older son would be a good prompt engineer.
You know, those guys make hundreds
seems to-
of thousands of dollars.
Well, my son's training on that, so when he does start making that money, he can
learn
start
how
paying
to
me back
talk
some
to
of
an
what
AI,
I've spent on
like
him
a
the last
dog
20 years.
trainer.
Exactly.
You're like an AI trainer.
Yeah. Those like how to like you know LLMs have no memory. They're stateless type of stuff, and so everything that you get in its memory is in a thing called a context window. So when you want to make that LLM think at a higher level, you either have to write prompts. So they'll call like zero shot or multi-shot prompting, where it's like, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, but I'm going to give you 3 examples. And if I give you 3 examples, it'll actually tailor the answer. And the machine will start picking up the pattern. Oh, I see how you're thinking about it. Or when you ask an LLM, show me your work, or do a chain of thought prompting, it'll give you
Quite popular now, isn't it?
It'll give you a different response than if you just fire it in there.
Yeah.
And then there's a technique called RAG, right? Where they basically, instead of that, you putting prompts in that context window, when you ask it a question, it'll go out and it'll have like almost a search engine on what they call a vector database, and it'll pull out relevant documents and it puts it into the prompt and gives context. So LLMs today very much run on the context you give it. So that's why if we just type in something and go like, it'll spit out so good. You get a prompt engineer, they're like, oh, let me write like a paragraph, and then you give it an example. And then if you put what they call RAG in, which is retrieval augmented generation, it can go get relevant documentation and pull that relevant documentation and feed that as part of the context.
So again, it's like layers of abstraction, like Ian was saying, with
Layers of
sedimentary rock.
Fine-tuned requests.
It's fine-tuned, but what most people think is AI is not the automatic genius. Like certain people can get more out of AI than other people. So it's a skill set to put these systems together. It's a skill set to do prompt engineering. It's a skill set to build the workflows. It's a skill set to curate the data that these things need. Like LLMs are brilliant. You feed it garbage, it's going to be an idiot.
Yeah.
It's the old database thing, isn't it? Rubbish in, rubbish out.
Absolutely.
To like anticipate what it's going to do when you ask something and be like, oh, if I do this, it's going to ask that. So that's not, it's going to answer that. So it doesn't work. So I need to change it to blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. And when we're doing a lot of the AI solutions, even inside of Mavenir or whatnot, right? The hardest thing to do is like make that AI do what you want it to do, right? If y'all wanted to train it to be a chess champion, how do I get it to be the best chess champion in the world, right? Did I train it on the right data set? Did I give it the right moves? Did I give it the right knowledge? So all these use cases we're doing, there's a huge amount of work on like looking at the data, analyzing the data. They call it exploratory data analysis to have the right distributions. What we found when we started training models, we're like, why is it giving us that answer? That's idiotic. And we're like, oh, you know, we were teaching it to drive on a straight road, and then we wanted to take a left turn. It's like, how the hell would I know how to take a left turn, right? This is what AI. This is these AI projects. So you start looking a lot at that data. Go, is it going to give the pattern, right, for my AI to pick up on? And then there's the whole AI model development, the hyperparameter tuning, and all that. So it's an entire skill set to get the answer you want out of this. And when I go back before and said these LLMs are freshly minted PhD students, I go back. I want that guy to be a telco expert. How do I make that guy a telco expert? And that takes skills.
Does Mavenir get involved in the sort of whole large language model development itself? Or
No.
is that not something that you'd ever want to?
No. I think there's everybody out there is building platforms.
Because some telcos say they want to do that, don't they? There's still a few that sort of say they.
Yeah, and they want to build their own.
Talk of telco-specific LLMs. Someone's got to do them.
Well, training. You train them specifically on the data. So here's the thing. It's like telcos wanting to build their own cloud. Right.
Right.
So you can do 2 things. Are you going to go grab your own Kubernetes distribution and start building all the tools yourself? Or are you going to go out there and take technology that perfectly works good and just manipulate it, right? And put it together in a way to do it?
Quite a lot of the European ones have done their own ones. BT, Deutsche Telekom, Orange, they've all got their own.
They try to own the cloud. But the question is, you know, it's like, do you want to spend all this time?
Yeah?
Well, Verizon used Red Hat,
right,
and the VCP, right? A lot of customers, when they build their own cloud, it's fine. They use a Dell, they use an HP, because to me, the value in cloud is how you integrate and run everything. It's not like you setting up your own Kubernetes distro and dealing with that.
Yeah.
Let somebody else deal with that. Figure out how to take that capability and make it work for your business. AI is going to be a lot of the same way. It's just a bunch of tools and toolkits out there, and so. Why would I develop a large language model? I got Anthropic doing it. We got OpenAI doing it. We got Meta doing it. We got Google doing it. Got DeepSeek doing it. They've got all these large language models, and they got their smaller models like
We're not allowed
Scout,
to use
Maverick.
DeepSeek, mate. And you got that memo.
Are you not allowed to use it even?
No, it's too Chinese.
Too Chinese right now, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, a few of them.
No, I was being a bit facetious. But
Yeah.
You can download it here, can you?
I know.
I think it's
okay.
bad.
You can do that. But the point is that the value is not in telcos. I think that, I always make this joke about, like, if I go out in a parking lot with my telco engineer and I go, I need a car. Parking lot will be full of cars. They'll look around and they'll run to the auto parts store and start buying parts and building it. And I'm like, what's wrong with that car? Oh, that's not going to work for telco. And I'm like, but why can't you modify the car to work for telco? It's our mindset, right? We can build it better. So I don't think there's any reason to take like redevelop, like build a Claude or build a Chat GPT type of model.
Yeah.
Now there would be value in taking a large language model and fine tuning it with telco data, right?
Totally.
Or learning how to do the prompt engineering or building agentic AI systems that are specific to telco.
Do you get involved in that?
Yeah, we do get involved.
That's where you step in.
That's where we step in, which I'm like, take the tools that are available, the state-of-the-art technology, and now you build a telco thing. Because somebody could build something for the medical industry, same tools will build something for the telco industry, but it's a different skill set. Because if you say something like SIP, right, that means something in telco. That means something different in the world. Like everybody's going to go, Brandon, this is SIP. I'm going to sip my beer. In telco, it means it's, technology protocol.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the tuning, the fine tuning or whatever they call it.
Yeah. And I feel that where we've got in this discussion over the last hour is, and it's going to ongoing, is this to and fro, this bouncing. We're testing the parameters from a more dystopian point of view, like how much is too much and all that sort of thing. You're going, yeah, fair enough, but don't lose sight of all the cool shit. And what an incredibly powerful tool it is, and all that sort of thing.
It's a good summmy. You must be AI.
Must be.
Well, he is.
I've just gone to AI in my
you
head.
couldn't replicate Scott. But
I told you can.
I've never tried it. I'm not narcissistic enough. I've never asked AI to do something in the style of Scott Pacino. Maybe one day I'll try it. Just like searching your own name on Google.
I hope you never ever do that.
I hope I never do, but now that I've said it, now
that
I've given myself the idea.
I don't want to know you.
If it had access to all the podcasts, you fine tune it on all those podcasts.
I think all it would do, it reminds me.
There'd be enough for voice, yeah, that's for
I
sure.
can't remember if we said this on the pod before, because obviously, Emma was just joking before we started recording that she was listening to a podcast on the speaker while she was cooking, and then one of her kids, who's perhaps a bit young to be hearing this, came in, and she's like, "Oh, is this the thing that you're going to go and sort of like hang out with these guys on Friday?" And she went, and then was it your daughter, Emma? Oh, your son. Just listen. And then there was I effing and blinding, because that's the way I talk. I mean, that is just the way I talk. I don't put it on for the pod. But I wonder if I asked AI.
That's what an AI would have to do.
Well, it reminded me, mate. There was a
very
really funny
AI.
bit. You remember Eddie Murphy back in the early '80s, and he did two classic stand-ups, Delirious and Raw. And then when he did Raw, one of his bits in Raw was him reflecting on feedback that he was getting from Delirious, because that was when he really was an international superstar, and he was very sweary. And this was at a time where being sweary was a little bit more contentious.
Yes.
And he had this joke about people would come up to him and just associate him only with swearing and go, "Hey, Eddie, fuck you, Eddie." And that would be their whole thing. And they'd be them just trying to lean into the joke. And he's going, I couldn't do just some curse-only set where he just went, "Yeah, hello, fuck, shit, bollocks," or whatever. And I wonder if I asked AI. Sorry, then I'll see. I wonder if I asked AI to do something in my style, all it would do is throw some swear words in. That's what I was leading up to.
No, he also had that bit when he mentioned that Cosby back in the day told him, like, you should tone down the.
Yeah.
Which is like, okay, coming from you now that we know.
Yes. Well, he did another bit about 20 years later.
Yeah, that must have been a lot later.
Kennedy Awards or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So before I move it on, Brandon. I mean, there's loads more we can get to. We still didn't get into that AI for RAN, on RAN, with RAN, about RAN.
That's not his thing, though, RAN.
Sort of thing. Well, but it's a Mavenir thing. Anyway, but we didn't get that, and we haven't got time, so I don't know why I said that, because I've just announced a thing that we're not going to talk about. But I just want to give you the opportunity in terms of like your day job, before we get onto other bits of news and all that sort of thing. Whether it's AI, whether it's cloud, whether it's whatever else you do. Are there any other things that you think our audience might find interesting about? I suppose the the theme of the conversation so far has been very much emerging technologies and how they impact telecoms and how telecoms can use them to its benefit. Are there any other things that spring to mind?
Yeah, and probably just one thing to round it out, and then we move on, is that, we talked a lot about what we're doing to bring in AI, but one of the things I find when I'm talking to customers is that they're saying, and it's the guys that are in kind of telco proper, right? But they're aware that, hey, we brought in teams of data scientists. Internally, we're starting these AI programs and projects, right? And, developing telco and developing AI, I told you kind of some of the stuff we're doing in AI. And the question is, but what's the thought process to get there? What is the methodology go to? How should we be thinking about this? So there are those types of conversations. So, that might be interesting to readers to be like, when you're really approaching an AI project, like we do things in telco, how would you think differently when you're doing AI? Because these are the conversations we have with our customers. And the first thing we talk about is the research is different. I'm like, you really have to. We just talked about how fast AI is moving. You really have to stay on top of the research. What's the latest model? It's a large language model, and it's a distilled model.
Well, it feels like there's a new one every day, man.
Every day. Yeah. Every day there's a new.
I think Anthropic just the latest one to come out with their new Claude.
Well, they have Claude, and then they have things like model context protocol, agent to agent protocol. And that thing about that context, right? First, it was just write a better prompt. Then it's RAG. Now it's using knowledge graphs. Now we have things called MCP. This happened in like 6 weeks. You know what I mean? So the whole thing is that when you're building these solutions, you got to know what tools are in the toolkit. So there's a lot more research. And typically, where do we default to when we're telco guys? We look to 3GPP, and I go, forget that. They will never keep up with what's going on here. So the first thing you got to do is stop looking for 3GPP for the answers in AI. That might be a little controversial, but fair
enough.
You got to look out.
I'm sure if they were in the room, they'd sort of reluctantly concede their point.
They might concede that point.
But all this, there's a new model out every day, and these things are becoming even more sophisticated. Also, I think reinforces the point that I was making, that this is really complicated stuff that's very, very broadly being deployed for some very important things. And I don't think there's been a point in society ever where something that's only understood really by a relatively small number of people is being used by so many other people.
That's a good point.
And if you wanted to go back to the days when electricity was being introduced, you could get somebody up to speed on what that's all about in a certain amount of time. Nobody can figure out any of this stuff, and it's going to get even more confusing in the next 50 years.
I push back on nobody because I think that's a whole area of study now.
But it's a very the people who are leading the development of these technologies are not small-brained people.
No, but I think there's probably, and my son's about to start on one of them, albeit at a small level, but there will be tons of courses at all universities, certainly at the elite ones, that offer a pretty fucking deep dive into this, I would have thought.
Oh, no, I think it's going to grow. But if you think about the university...
That's not what I'm saying, though. What I'm saying is that the majority of people are not going to be able to understand this technology.
But that's the incentive to be one of the exceptions, isn't it?
Yeah, to be an exception, exactly. It will be a technology that's directed by a few exceptions. It'll be a situation where, and this is probably why we won't be controlled by AI. We'll be controlled by Sam Altman.
Those few people who
we'll be controlled by someone like
Sam Altman. More on Sam Altman
people
later.
Who actually understand how this stuff works.
I've got a great Sam Altman story to talk about. No, I think that's a fair point. I suppose I could argue, if I was going to push back again, 'twas ever thus, that we're always in the hands of those few people who are either clever enough or who've devoted enough of their time to becoming experts.
For sure, but I think it would be even more apparent in an AI world.
Yeah.
But even if you bring that analogy, right? At telco, we've been in the hands of the standards body. And one of the things I always talk about my guys, I go, guys, the way that telco works, 3GP writes the standards, and that's nothing more than a tool for procurement to put it in a spreadsheet to go out and shop prices. So we've commoditized everything, right? Yeah. So I do think that area, that point of to stay innovative, you've got to go ahead and see what's going on, outside of telco, state of the art, bring it in. And then the second point that we make is that, and this is very un-telco-like, I go, start with the use case. Don't start with the technology and try to figure out what to do with it. 5G, anybody heard of it, right? And it goes back to the Steve Jobs thing, right? Remember when Steve Jobs, I think it was in like one of these pressers he had, or with his employees, they said, this guy brought up, why are we not using this great technology? And he made the point, he goes, I have so many scars from starting with technology and trying to market it, which sounds exactly like telco. He goes, start with the customer, work your way back to the technology. And all the AI work we've done, all the results we've gotten, we've had a laser-like focus on what is the use case first. Then we work back at all the toolkits and research and applied them versus saying we're going to do all this stuff and throw GPUs and large language models and build a 5G AI network and then figure out what to do with it.
Somewhere, hopefully, our friend and frequent podcast guest Neil McRae's listening, and he'll be raising a Diet Coke to that, because he's always saying, why can't we be more customer centric, more like use case first rather than technology first? And I've heard other people say it as well, and it always makes sense to me. I remember the first time I heard the term customer centric, I thought it sounds redundant. Why would you be anything other than customer centric?
Why would you not be? Yeah.
But what it was a comment on internal processes within companies where they can get so bogged down in their own internal processes or being in love with a certain initiative or technology or whatever that they haven't stopped to think, who the fuck cares?
They missed the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with AI, what we found is to be successful in AI, everybody has to know what the point is. If you can't explain the point, if your experts can't explain the point to the data scientists, they'll never get there. That's the key. And that brings it up to the third part. And I mentioned it before. You've got to have the domain experts. I had one customer going, our data scientists are asking this data. And I go, you know what they're asking you for? They're asking you for context, because they can't train those models unless they have the context for you. And our guys, they were complaining like, well, they're asking for all this data and we ain't need all, because they just didn't understand. Why would they need this? So the fact that they had their data scientists in one room and their telco guys in another room, I'm like, you're never going to get there. And then the fourth piece is that it's not about the models. Everybody over-rotates to the Anthropic Claudes and the OpenGPTs. I go, but no one really thinks about the data. And they think that, and actually I had this conversation with the guys up the road. I go, everybody thinks bigger is better, which is we all build data lakes. If only I had more data. I go, no. You need the right data. You don't throw all the garbage into the LLM. You throw the right information to give it context. So data curation, and we in telco are pack rats.
Yeah.
I go, how many times do we turn on every knob in the damn system, every log, every alarm, every KPI? I got 6 terabytes of data. No one knows the root cause because we don't have the log we need. So the point is, it's like I have a warehouse of clothes and I take my wife out to dinner. She can't find an outfit. What's the point? Right?
Yeah, or you go into Starbucks and you say, just give me a fucking coffee. And there's too many choices.
Exactly.
And it reminds me a little bit of some of the conversations we used to have about big data 10 or 20 years ago. It's all very well having tons of data. But
which is this concept of data cleaning?
That's part of it.
Who does that then?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Even when we did into the AI, what we started as our data scientists will get the data. They weren't doing a good job at the data cleansing. Right. We actually started giving that EDA data cleansing to our system engineers, and they started looking at it and go, oh, yeah, that data's wrong. I'm like, okay, we'll fix it then. That's your data, right? You guys design this stuff. So the fact is that when you get the experts involved in the data cleansing problem, they understand what the data should look like. They understand what are outliers and things like that. The data science can say, yeah, that data row is missing. They can pick out the obvious.
So the data cleansing is quite a complex job in itself. It's not the sort of thing you can put a bunch of 16-year-olds on to sort of tidy it up and get it into the right format.
And you have to know the domain. Like if I had somebody cleaning up like medical data, I probably need somebody that's got some medical knowledge, like in the doctor, to do it. And the point being is that none of these solutions are ever going to see the light of day.
It's not just a telco
without
problem.
the telco domain expert. It'll work in any field.
Yeah.
Remember what I talked about, that prompt engineering, that RAG database? Like, how do you know what documents to get? Those documents are your enterprise data. So if you want that basic LLM to start thinking like your business, that RAG database we had to be based on your documents, and then it's only going to be as good as the documents you load in there. So someone's got to do all that data curation to put the right documents in, so it's giving you the right answer. So that data piece is, people very much underestimate that, and it's not getting a bigger, badder data lake. It's figuring out how do you get the right data and right relevant, because you're teaching a newly minted brain to think.
So could the AI do the data cleansing, or?
It can help in some regards, but to think about it, someone's got to start with what documents do we even start that are relevant?
Yeah.
AI is not going to know that, and where are they? AI is not going to figure that out. And then you can use AI to do things like if you want to extract certain things, like extract features out of documents. But AI is very you can do I need you to extract like a node or a relationship. You can do that, but just giving it a blank problem and say, go figure this out with no guidance. AI is horrible at like, go figure this out with no guidance.
Yeah.
You got to start somewhere, and somebody has to shape the prompt, shape the question. I want you to do this specific type. The more specific you are with AI, why do you think it gives you a better answer if you give it 3 examples instead of 1? The more specific you are, the better answer
it wants
get.
guidance.
Well,
it's like a trained dog.
I hope it never comes along and just sort of starts going, oh, well, there's a problem that needs figuring out, because that's bad.
Well, one thing I want to say, if you don't mind me
it?
butting in, just because we're running out of time, we want to cover 1 or 2 newsy bits before we go to the pub and drink more beer.
Well, we got to get to the pub.
Yeah, well, quite. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's 3:30. It's nearly closing time. Like to wrap it up, just some thoughts on the sort of human part. I think, and this is kind of what you've said a few times, or at least what I've interpreted by what you said a few times, Brandon, is humans have still got to make decisions. I think decision making is a key thing.
Mm-hmm.
Humans still got to make decisions. And also back to the whole, you don't get fired for buying whoever. Managers are always going to want an underling to bollock and scapegoat when things fuck up.
Right.
I know I'm being half sort of satirical there, but you can't blame a computer if something goes wrong. If someone goes, Scott, why did this go wrong? You go, well, the computer told me to. That's not going to fly. Whereas if I can say, well, let's say in a weird inverted world, Brandon, you reporting to me. I can say, well, it's Brandon. I told him to do it, and he fucked it up, and so I can scapegoat you. Anyway, I'm sort of being tongue in cheek, but I think the decision making cascade has still got to fall down to humans.
Absolutely.
And to Ian's point that he keeps making, which I agree, the worry that humans increasingly get marginalised even from the decision making part of it. That's a concern, but right now it's beyond my imagination to imagine a corporate structure like we work for a big FTSE 100 company in Forma. That's why we've got this lovely shiny building.
That's nice.
It's not all on the back of Telecoms.com and light reading, sadly. And it's full of people, and we have all these interactions. We have corporate structures. We all know who we report into and who reports into us, and where we fit into the great scheme of things. I think that's always going to remain. I think I can see, to a point Ian's made today and previous times and times before, a salami slicing of the human element, and more jobs. You think you were talking about risk calculation. You can imagine like the insurance industry, actuaries and that sort of thing, or paralegals, or anyone who's got to do something predictable and repetitive, or maths based,
crunching data.
Exactly. But I think you're always going to have to. Ultimately, decisions are going to have to be made by human beings. Mm-hmm. And so I think that will be the case for a while. How long is another matter. But if you don't mind, you two, I'll wrap it up there and move it on to 1 or 2 other bits and bobs. In fact, I've got another vested interest here because I'm going to do what I often do, which is queue up a thing that Ian's written so he can talk us through it, which gives me the opportunity to leg it off to the bog while he's doing it. So that's what I'm going to do. Why are you frowning? We do that all the time.
All right.
Which means I'm going to have to climb over you and Emma, by the way. To American audience, the bog means the toilet.
Or we could just take a break and then I can go as well.
Oh, I see. You want to go. Sorry, how rude of me not to ask. Okay, well, we'll have a quick break and then we'll pick it up there. All right. Okay, we're back and we got a funny thing that we got to reflect on. Emma was just showing us. She took a photo of all of us. You might remember from the start of the pod. And then she asked AI to put a Telecoms.com paraphernalia in the background. And the AI, like to the point that we were making about parameters, a lot of the stuff, this is kind of feeding into me and Ian's most dystopian fears. The AI, as well as putting telecoms in the background, changed all our faces.
Yeah.
So we look like completely different people.
It took some liberties.
Except for you, Emma. You were sort of more or less you.
Maybe
you look like a slightly cartoony version of you.
Actually, maybe this is a safety thing because you could ask all sorts of things to appear in a picture and then it would be like trying to, say you're doing something illegal, and then so if you changes your face, then
it looks like
Emma's
different
posted it. I'm now going to find. I've got a photo of Emma because I've got a photo of you chatting to Ian at the Glow-Tals last year. I'm going to get AI to doctor that and put it on the body of a sumo wrestler or something.
That's my point.
See how you like it.
No, what if Emma had asked add a whole bunch of drugs on the table? And then we're like, oh my god, we get fired because look, they're doing drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they changed all our faces.
Emma
Like,
goes,
well, that's not us.
Put a mound of Charlie in the middle.
Yes, but she hadn't done that.
Okay.
I think I swear to God, it must be like a copyright illegal filter.
All right, so back to boring old telecoms. A couple of stories we're going to talk about. this week BT had its quarterlies, and often telco quarterlies are quite boring because telecoms companies don't.
I don't
grow.
think BT ones usually are.
Well, I'm queuing it up, mate. I said they're usually boring. Can't you see how I'm queuing up to say not this time? Because they don't really grow much. They don't really do anything very exciting other than just trickle along. But Ian wrote a piece going, BT does fiber even more furiously to stem broadband losses. And we covered it as well. And part of it was an announcement that came out alongside their quarterlies to do with Openreach, which is sort of owned / not owned by BT.
Well, it's totally owned by BT.
I know, but they supposedly had that little legal
I don't think
separation.
anybody believes that anymore.
I know. Anyway, I won't. I'll shut up now. Why did you go for that headline? Why do you think this is more exciting?
I went for the headline because they have the thing about doing fibre like fury, which I think Philip Janssen came up with when he was. Is it Philip Janssen or Philip Janssen?
That's a good point. I don't know.
I think they're both fine.
I would, yeah, okay. Anyway, he was the previous CEO who left in he left early last year because Alison Kirkby, who's the current CEO, took over.
Who hasn't got an ambiguous surname?
Who hasn't? No, although people pronounce it Kirby and got in trouble for it during the earnings call.
Don't mess with Alison.
Yes,
she'll fuck you up.
Yeah. She took over in February last year, but she's pretty much stuck with his strategy on, which isn't surprising.
Which is what?
To roll out a lot of fibre, like Fury, Scott, and connect like crazy.
Trying to picture some furious fibre engineer. Like, fucking get in there.
Yeah, and the reason she's not changed it is because they didn't really have a choice. If they don't do it, then altnets are going to clean up instead. And that's kind of what's been happening. It's not what's been happening, actually. That's like massive exaggeration. But they've had this problem of like broadband line losses going on for a few quarters.
Have they? Right.
Yeah, so in areas, that's why their share price kind of went down when they opened, even though the results were like reasonably good, I think, certainly on the bottom line. In areas that they've not reached with fibre, which is obviously like a shrinking part of the country now because they're trying to do it, they have been like rolling it out really quickly. Like Fury, even, you could say.
Which I still feel is a slight exaggeration, but there you go.
It's
nice and alliterative.
Yeah, they've lost business to altnets, alternative operators building.
Yeah.
And this is the reason they kind of went into the market in the first place, into the fibre market. For a long time, they were kind of wedded to their old copper-based broadband stuff and like, oh, no, we don't really need to get to fibre. And you used to see those FTTH council tables, and the UK was always at the bottom, and now it's probably quite a long way.
Because BT always had an incentive to sweat its assets.
Sweat your assets. And there's no other real competition along, so why not do that? And then the market got sort of more kind of liberalised, I guess, and we had the sort of entry of altnets coming in. Too many altnets, actually. There's like too many altnets now. There's like a consolidation phase going on, and a lot of them aren't doing very well, but they have kind of chipped away at BT's market share. So in areas where it's not reached with fibre, which I think is up to 18 million now, 80 million premises passed with fibre.
It has passed 18 million premises.
It's past 18 million premises. Its target is...
Do we assume a population of, 4 per premise?
I think it's talking... in terms of the number of premises in the UK, it's over 30 million, but it's not that much over 30 million.
Oh, so it's only about 2. I was just trying to imagine
you're over the halfway
premises
point.
into population. That's all.
Yeah, you're over the halfway point on premises now, and the target's to get to 25 million by the end of next year, and they've got this sort of more distant target of perhaps 30 million by 2030, but I think that would depend on regulation.
Some of that's political. They have to tell the government they're giving it their best effort.
It's political, yeah. But they because they've got this issue of line. So in areas they haven't reached. Like community fibre, for instance, I'm speaking from personal experience.
They're your dudes. So they're your dudes as well, Pierre.
Cool.
Community fibre. Stop looking at YouTube and listen to the podcast.
Participate in the conversation, please, Pierre.
I was trying to find the Microsoft article.
Community fibre is an altnet in London. Very successful altnet in London, apparently. They're
great.
They came out with some earnings statement recently. They actually seem to be doing quite well. But I used them when I moved home recently, and then I had to move home again, so I kind of stuck with them. And they've taken. It's clear that I couldn't get a BT OpenReach service if for some reason in my area.
Right.
I think
Even though you're in London.
I think what BT's done is probably try to go out, I don't know, but to some extent go into areas where there isn't as much. You would go to areas where there's not perhaps as much altnet competition. So if someone's got there first, then you
well, and vice versa. The altnets are presumably being quite clever about finding pockets.
You're trying to minimise overlap. You don't want five. There has been this phenomenon of getting it's overbuild. It's called like 5 networks in one area.
For choice.
Yeah. But community fibre was in like the Wandsworth area, and you couldn't get BT, so I kind of went with community fibre because I was on an old BT package, and community fibre has been really good. So they obviously BT lost me as a customer. I'm part of that problem of broadband line losses.
Yeah, you're part of the problem.
I'm part of the problem, and to address the problem, what she's done is said we're going to speed up fibre rollout over the next year. So they built to 4 million premises in the last 12 months. And they're going to increase the rollout pace to do up to 5 million in the next 12. So going to March 2026, basically, which would take them to 23 million premises passed. But the ultimate target is still 25 million by the end of. So then it slows down again. But it's like this acceleration of build out, which means they're having to spend more over the next financial year, which means their capex projection is higher than what anybody was expecting. It's like 5 billion. I think people were expecting it to come down. Free cash flow is lower, the projection. And she's basically made this big case about free cash flow going up year after year. So that's kind of been changed. She said last year we're at peak capex. She had to sort of row that back in the earnings call and say, I said peak capex, but it doesn't make any sense. I get why she's doing it, but she had to sort of make some kind of excuses. And this issue of line losses has obviously been a lot worse for them than they expected it to be. And they've lost, I think if I looked at it, they've lost 450,000 broadband lines in the last 6 months. So it's the 6 months to March 2025, which is about 2% of the broadband base. But if you go back 2 years, they've lost about 6% of the broadband base. And I always said, not saying that I always am capable of looking into the future and saying what's going to happen, but I always said one problem for them was going to be that kind of delta between, you want to get your existing footprint upgraded to fibre as quickly as possible because then you've addressed the problem. But in the areas where you don't have that, you've got this issue of altnets coming along and offering a faster service and lower rates, right. and then it's an issue. The other problem they've got is it's not just, that's wholesale numbers, the line losses. So that's not just, you were saying this like legal separation issue. Openreach is the network infrastructure part of BT that builds, but the numbers are in terms of actual connections, those numbers are not just BT retail, it's like TalkTalk, Sky, whatever, the guys that actually buy the kind of service
wholesale.
And BT retail's actually done quite well, I think, but one of those altnets, which I think it was almost identified in the earnings call by Karen Egan at Enders Analysis, do you know them?
I know of them. Yeah.
Sounds like it's TalkTalk, which is basically like, and she said it sounds like the problem's with your CPs rather than BT retail. And then the answer, without her sort of, and she identified, Karen Egan identified TalkTalk, and Alison Kirkby, in responding to the question, didn't identify TalkTalk, but she said, yes, one of our CPs has basically not been investing enough and they've lost customers. So if
I understood you correctly, you're saying the losses are not direct BT customers, they're indirect.
It's other CPs. BT retail's been doing well.
And TalkTalk's been a car crash for
I think
years,
I think TalkTalk's the one, from what it sounded like, is the one that's like been the main problem.
I don't know why anyone goes to that. I can't remember ever writing something about TalkTalk where it wasn't some bad news. Yeah,
but that's the problem for BT, is that if those guys are not doing well and they're not investing and they're not kind of trying to upsell fibre to their customers, then there's not a lot BT can do about it. It's almost that it's kind of, they can screw it over basically by not kind of selling and doing the right thing.
I'm presumably thinking behind the increased fibre investment, is it, if TalkTalk drops the ball, then someone else will pick it up.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happened, is like TalkTalk's dropped the ball, and people like it wouldn't be community fibre necessarily, but there's NetOmnia, there's City Fibre is the big one that everybody talks about.
Is community fibre Openreach as opposed to City Fibre or VMware?
No, it's their own lines.
It's their own shit, right?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, they use BT ducts and poles, a lot of them.
Yeah.
That's different from being, so they use Openreach products, but that's different from being somebody who's on an actual Openreach fibre line, if you see what I mean. So... Okay. So there's different, it's a different product. They make some money out of these altnets anyway through PIA, I think it's called, Physical Infrastructure Access, but which is just using the ducts and poles. So if you've ever had someone come over and install fiber, they kind of go up the pole and tug the line over and put it through.
Yeah, I remember it.
And that's an OpenReach owned facility, because pretty much all the physical infrastructure is either OpenReach or Virgin Media O2. So there's still some wholesale work for them, but it's not actually an OpenReach line. It would be somebody like NetOmnia doing it instead, or City Fibre is the big one.
Yeah.
Virgin Media O2 has not been doing very well, it's quite clear. And the whole Next Fibre thing seems to have taken a bit of in fact, it was in the news, I think, in the last couple of weeks, wasn't it? That they're not investing as much in Next Fibre. This is this joint venture between VMO2 and InfraVia Capital Partners, I think.
There's always M&A whisper around them. Yeah.
So the impact of all this is BT's results were, I thought, fairly good at a glance. It's like sales is slightly down. That's like the telco story, yeah. And their net profit was up quite a bit. And the reason net profit's up quite a bit is because even though they've been making all this investment in fibre and CapEx, they've made massive cuts to operating costs.
Which is where AI comes in.
Partly where AI comes in. I think it's not just AI, but they're cleaning up a lot of the IT estate. They're doing more stuff in the cloud. They're shutting down old exchanges that they don't need anymore that are copper based. They're now phasing out 3G. So it's all to do with that. But it was interesting that Simon Louth, the CFO, did call out AI as one of the things, and their headcount's going down really dramatically, like more than probably any other European operator at the moment, I'd say, out of the big ones. There was a time when you used to look at what AT&T and Verizon were doing, and it was like, that's been really dramatic over the last kind of decade. But BT's now, they had, so if they include contractors in the picture, they had 130,000 members of staff, I think, 2 years ago. They're down to 116,000, and their target at the midpoint of their guidance is for 82,500 in 2030. So you're talking like 40,000 jobs going, basically.
Yeah, and it's hard to. I mean, this is. I know you're about to talk, and I was about to throw a question at you anyway, Brandon. This is kind of germane to the main conversation we've been having over this pod over automation and.
Anyone want a beer?
Yeah, I'll take one. I'm about to get a question. I should get a beer with it.
Yeah, you should get a beer with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the image is. There's been lots of talk in the past of telcos just this is in a different context when we've been speaking about, actually it came up a lot in the public cloud, where telcos increasingly own less and less of their own infrastructure. They do infrastructure sharing,
right?
They they outsource a lot of their IT and automation to hyperscalers or whatever, or at least the maintenance of it and so on, such that what they end up being is the interface with the customer. That's what they'll always have. They'll always have that brand. I'm an EE customer.
Sure.
I'll always have that relationship with EE. But then behind the scenes, it could be that 90% of the stuff's not being done directly by EE anymore. They're outsourcing it to contractors and third parties and partners and all that sort of thing. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that in the context of what Ian was just saying about the headcount cutting and automation and the AI stuff we were talking about earlier.
I got a little bit of an interesting take on this and it comes up a lot in our cloud discussions. And it's a question about control. Now, you mentioned it before. It's like the reason a lot of these operators don't want to go to public cloud, they like too much control. It's a U.S. company, got the data privacy. I can't see it, right? What was really interesting too, and I was having these conversations, and I heard it from a couple operators this week. One of the reasons they want to go back to cloud and stuff, they said, you know what? We've kind of relied too much on our vendors. So it's not just that they're, basically selling assets and then maybe, paying people to outsource them and do that kind of stuff. I think they've stopped. They've a lot of them are kind of signaling that, we've lost the ability to fend for ourselves. We rely too much on our vendors. So they said, we'll pay the Ericssons and the Nokias a lot of money. And so part of taking back control is like, I got to stop paying them for every change I got to do and everything I want to do in a professional services, and it's take back control. Because you're right. Why do you need all those people if all you're doing is stroking checks and writing it out to your vendors to do all the work for you? So part of, I think, of bringing that work back is taking control of the work and saying, look, instead of writing a check to the vendors, I can do it myself with less people using automation ads. So you don't need to employ this automation necessarily to cut your own workforce. You can use it to say, take control of that work back to your workforce.
And differentiate.
Differentiate, upskill your workers, right? Upskill, right? Learning new stuff, and then if you start in cloud and AI, here's the other thing: you're going to attract new talent, take more control, take control of your destiny. So stop letting someone else drive the bus. So I do think, and I do think I've seen that type of appetite coming from the customers we're talking to, and like, well, why don't we help you along this journey, building that AI DNA, building that cloud DNA, show you how to operate with this stuff. That, take control of your destiny, take it back.
Yeah.
No, that all makes lots of sense. And I think it is interesting, isn't it? It's such an enduring cliche within telecoms that they lack the ability to innovate and differentiate and present new products and therefore extract more ARPU. Because why the fuck would I spend any more with EE than I do now, because they're not offering me anything novel or new.
That's actually like that. The interesting thing about the BT results in a way is because I think when Alison Kirkby joined, everybody was like, oh, it's a massive difference with Philip Jansen. She's a totally different kind of person, and this is like a really good sign, which I sort of pushed back on quite a lot.
Did you?
Yeah, because she's not really changed. She's quite a different person, obviously.
But you said she's kind of picked up the baton and run with it.
She has a very different management style.
Yeah.
And I think you could argue she's actually been more effective, so even in the short time she's been there.
She seems a bit more extrovert, a bit more open to chatting
from
to
what
people.
I've been told, she's much more engaged with staff and everything. But she's pretty much doing what she's got a reputation for doing, which is cost cutting and running like a very efficient ship. And she's not really changed his fundamental strategy, which is let's not focus on things like what his predecessor Gavin Patterson was doing, which is trying to get BT into TV, sports, and all this stuff. Back when their share price is about 5 times as high as it is now, let's focus on the fibre and the infrastructure, and actually selling out a lot of stuff. I mean, they've spun off this international bit of the business unit is now its own separate thing. It looks like it's being prepped for a sale, basically. So it's all UK focused. They're a less international operator now than they've ever been, and that's her plan. And so their only opportunity for sales growth now is try and get the people that buy broadband and mobile services from them in the UK to spend more money with them. And I think that's going to be pretty difficult for them in a competitive market.
Especially, you mentioned the diversification. I wrote up a bit of journalism this week, where I think it's the FT. Got a scoop that they were thinking of totally exiting their content bit with Warner Brothers Discovery, TNT Sports, all that. And they gave it a good go, and I think that started under Patterson. I think that's something Alero was quite into.
But why shareholders might be happy, and the share price, I think it went down on the earnings day, but it's up quite a lot since she's been in charge.
Oh, I was just looking at that. I can confirm that. So she started in early 2024, and around that time it was at about 100. Now it's at about 170.
Right.
So that's more like 70%.
Right.
That's good.
So that it's gone up a lot, and I think the reason they're going to be happy is because she looks like a good manager, and this the story is like revenue's fairly flat, but spending a lot less, and that's not just operational costs. Like their capex is going like to massively dive. So even though they've had this,
even with the fibre investment,
so that's a short-term thing. I mean, basically what they've done is they're not saying we're going to build fibre to more premises than we previously said. They're just saying we're accelerating it. We're going to get to 23 million quicker than we were previously going to get to 23 million. And if you look at the guidance that they've issued, is that free cash flow, which I think is about 1.5 billion, it's supposed to be in the 2026 financial year. They're targeting 2 billion in 2027 and 3 billion in 2030. That's all cuts to she has this thing, peak capex, like people talk about peak oil, like we're past peak capex. I mean, that's the worrying thing, I think, for anybody who serves the telcos. Is like they're basically just spending less money. That's like the European telcos are basically just planning to spend less money. They're all cutting capital intensity on flat revenues, which is like they're not building out networks in the way they used to. I mean, they might spend more on AI and things like that, but the overall envelope is like.
Tell you a funny thing about share price. I was just looking at BT's share price on my laptop.
Well, it used to be really high in 2015.
I'm talking more immediately.
Yeah.
It fell off a little bit when the earnings first came out. It just shows how volatile these things are and what a bunch of sort of frightened little antelopes these share dealers are. It fell off a little bit, and by the end of the day, it had not just recovered that, it was way above it. Oh, God, can you imagine how horrible it would be to be someone who works in shares? Like, you're shitting yourself when it suddenly falls off there. By the end of the day, it's up there.
Yeah,
I'm showing you the
but
curve.
that's a small scale, isn't that? Scale's like
that's just this week. Well,
that makes it look better than it is.
I'm not trying to. No. I've looked at the bigger picture, and obviously, it was much bigger back in 2016 and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, your Y scale there is like.
I know, but
yeah.
this is what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the volatility of shares and why they need to be taken with a little bit of a pinch of salt.
Yeah, they do.
But you're right. Back in 2016, it was trading at nearly 500, and now it's trading at 172. So if you bought then, actually, I learnt this from Richard Windsor that we quite often cite. He calls it a value trap. I didn't know that because I've never been an equity analyst. I've never been a share dealer or whatever. But a value trap, I think, if I've understood it correctly, is when you buy and it goes down and you go, well, I better sit on it till it goes back up again. The
it
fucking
never goes
thing
back
never
up
goes
back up again.
And so your liquidity, your money's just trapped in this thing because you don't want to sell.
Yeah,
because that's when it's only when you sell when you realise your losses, isn't it?
If you bought a year ago,
It's
you'd
called
be doing
diamond
quite
hands.
well.
It's called what?
Diamond hands.
Right.
If you bought a year ago, you'd be doing quite well on BT.
Yeah. But if you bought 10 years ago,
I bet on a 5-year period, or maybe even 10 years, you'd be doing quite well of DT shares out of all the European telcos. I imagine that's the only one that's actually done any good.
Well, that's mainly because of T-Mobile, isn't it?
It's entirely because of T-Mobile. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the last segment because we've got like about 10 or 15 minutes left or something, I think. Well, we started a bit about 15:15, I think. Anyway. Just a couple of little, almost sort of fun bits that I wrote about this week. This is the Scott Pacino self-indulgent TM section, which I quite often do at the end, which has normally got fuck all to do with telecoms and elicits some degree of opprobrium from Ian. One is AI related, which I just think is quite funny, and I shared this with Ian and Pierre on our little Teams group. OpenAI, which is run by this geezer Sam Altman, who's very utopian about AI.
Hello, darkness, hello.
Yeah, exactly. That's the photo. So I'm gonna say to people, listen to the podcast, go on to Telecoms.com or just go onto the search engine. My headline is OpenAI's Altman pays over $6 billion for a new best buddy and his vaporware. And the reason I say it's his new best buddy, I don't know if you saw this, Brandon or Emma. This is the photo that they did to accompany this announcement. That other guy is Johnny Ive, who's the one who invented the iPhone.
They're about to drop an album.
Yeah. You know what I mean, they got this black and white photo of Sam Altman in the foreground, looking sort of enigmatic, and then Johnny Ive behind him, resting his head on his, looking like they've just got married. In fact, I retweeted. I embedded a tweet at the bottom from someone I'd never heard of, but I just thought it's funny.
There's like pregnancy photos, you know.
Well, it says this. This one said this blog is styled like a cross between a wedding announcement and a memorial webpage, because it's black and white as well. And anyway, and it gets creepier than that. The blog posts that went along with it was all very like it was just being very mutually adoring. They're like, this is why this guy's so great. This is why this guy's so great, and it's just a bit creepy. You know, and if they are in love, then fucking, I'm happy for them. But it's just weird because I don't think they are.
You should be careful what you say about Sam Altman. He's your future overlord.
Probably, yeah. I know, that's going to be... You say AI doesn't have a memory.
Musk's
Sam Altman
now.
fucking does.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, I'm going to be on his shit list. Well, whatever.
I mean, Ive is obviously going to be smiling because he's...
Yeah, Ive's just laughing. But, well, because Sam Altman... So here's the story. Sam Altman, OpenAI, but who Sam Altman runs, they paid around $6.5 billion to buy this startup called IO, which was jointly started by Ive and Altman, which is in the area of devices.
So wait, is he paying himself then?
No, he was paying him a further $5 billion. I think they were like seed investors, and then he's decided to buy the rest of it. But the really funny thing is he hasn't bought Ive. Ive still gets to be independent. Ive still gets to be part of this other weird thing that he calls it a creative collective. It's called Love From. So this is the kind of fucked up things that these people come up with. Yeah. It's all very old school Silicon Valley and touchy feely. And anyways, he still gets to be at Love From, but Richard Windsor, again, I'll cite him again because I reference him in this. He called him the most expensive consultant in the world because they've just spent $6.5 billion. And
I think it's like 50 people.
It's 55 people.
Really?
Yeah.
It's 55 people. And the reason my headline says vaporware, they haven't come out with any products yet. So they spent $6.5 billion.
There is a rumored device that doesn't have a screen, which...
Well, a rumored device. So that's the substance of the story, is this is going to be the hardware division of OpenAI, and it's going to come up with some new amazing widget that we know nothing about yet because they don't even seem to know anything about it. Or It's nothing that they're prepared to share with anyone. But it will redefine how we interact with it, and apparently it's not smart glasses, which is where a lot of the action around AI is right now. And it's just hilarious. I'll read my concluding paragraph. Actually, there's this paragraph. To paraphrase it, I said, this is an unconventional marriage. I was going with the marriage theme throughout my piece. This is an unconventional marriage, however, as Love From will continue to operate independently and OpenAI will be just one of its customers. So it seems all those billions still aren't enough to buy monogamy from Ive. and as Radio Free Mobile points out, there seems to be little to stop Ive from shacking up with the next billionaire to show him a bit of ankle. And this is the weird thing. I mean, Ive, no wonder he's sitting there leaning his head on his shoulder, looking all lovey-dovey, because he's just got so much money now. He doesn't know what to do with it. He's got money bonfires in his house to keep him warm. So that's one funny little story. But I encourage the audience to look up my story, not because I'm fishing for clicks, but because it's got this weird black and white photo of the two of them.
Nice album cover.
But
looking like
the device doesn't have a screen, because I wonder what TikTok, Meta, well, no one knows anything about it. All these companies are thinking about.
Only the little we know about it is a bit of a leak from the Wall Street Journal, where they said it's definitely not like specs.
I've read that it doesn't have a screen.
Yeah, so it doesn't have a screen.
So
it's obviously got to be a voice UI.
It doesn't have a screen.
So then it surely could go with the phone then, because people still want to scroll apps.
But what is it? Does anybody know what it's supposed to do?
Well, quite. I mean, it's supposed to take you to the next level with your interaction with AI, but it kind of defies my imagination.
I can't even know what that means. Yeah, you can't talk to it.
The rabbit thing, which was like a clip-on and had a laser thing,
and there was Humane, which was a little pin as well,
and that failed. But
interacting with AI with no screen, no voice.
It's like Her, the movie Her, where you would just talk to someone But people still like to consume visual things.
By the way, another thing, Brandon. Again, you should click on the story. Maybe we'll watch it later on. There's also a video of them having this little buddy cop chat in a bar, where they go, "Gee, you're so great. Yeah, you're so great too." Except that Johnny Ive's English, so I got the accents wrong. But it's just very weird. The whole thing about it, everything about Sam Altman. I've never seen Sam Altman manifest himself in a way where he doesn't actually seem like he's a fucking robot.
Maybe that picture,
Runner, if you ask me.
That picture is AI
maybe
generated.
He is actually an AI.
Maybe that's it.
That picture is AI actually. That's why it's cringe.
And that's why he's so good at doing AI.
This is what it is.
AI doing AI.
See, you're
AI doing AI. That's what we warned of.
That's him.
Lizard people.
Yeah. Even like the wonkiness of his smile seems contrived. It's like they've gone, AI, make me imperfect. Anyway, so that's one little story. And then another one I wanted to mention, complete departure, is it was probably just as well for you, Brandon, as it's got to do with like American geopolitics.
I told you I was Canadian.
Yeah, that's
we're gonna go there.
I know that. And do you know, I first heard that years ago. I used to, in my 20s, I used to backpack around Latin America quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I always used to get told, I used to meet Americans, and they'd always say, I say I'm Canadian. Because, of course, America's had a sort of mixed relationship with Latin America for decades.
Yeah.
So there we are. No, I believe you. You sound very Canadian. Say about.
About?
Yeah, that's close enough.
Hey.
This is just another story, which actually is geopolitical, but it's mainly, I think, funny. And that's why I'm bringing it up right at the end, because it doesn't necessarily require a ton of discussion, although you're welcome. So my headline, what?
Is it funny? I just can't wait for you to...
Well, I'm going to explain why it's funny. I'm going to explain why it's funny. Talk about fucking raining on my parade before I've even said anything. My headline is, Malaysia caught up in US-China Cold War once more after Huawei GPU announcement. So I grant you, there's nothing immediately comedic about that. So to summarize it, about a week or two ago, America came out with one of those big announcements that they're doing quite a lot under Trump, which says, rest of the world, do this or you're going to piss us off, sort of thing.
Right, come begging.
Yeah, or just very very assertive, very muscular, very one-directional
Come with a plain offer.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a crypto. Yeah.
Right, we're gonna tariff the fuck out you. Come and beg for forgiveness, sort of thing. And they announced this thing. They've got a bit of probably the biggest thing that seems to worry America most at the moment is that China is going to be as good as America at AI. Back to our core theme of this podcast. And most of the companies we've spoken about, including Sam Altman, they're all American companies. But then everyone got a bit shat up when DeepSeek, and then there was another one, I forget the name of them, begins with M. But China seems to be catching up. And one of the biggest ways in which America is trying to...
Well, you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know what?
Whether China's catching up or not anyway, would you?
Well, you can use DeepSeek.
Yeah, I know, but the reason people talk about American companies is because you get all your news from the Western media.
Yeah, you couldn't know for sure, I guess. Yeah.
Like there's loads of Chinese AI companies, but no reason no one talks about them is because no one really
they're under-publicised.
They're
if you think about it,
by the Western media.
DeepSeek took everybody by surprise.
Yeah.
To your point, Ian.
So I don't really get this idea that China's way behind. I mean, he's got reasons for saying it, I know, but I'm more inclined to sort of agree with Jensen Huang's take on it that they're not really behind.
I agree.
There's a couple of key
DeepSeek proved that.
Semiconductor areas where they're behind, like things like EUV, but there's not a lot else.
Well, so that feeds into this because this is all about the semiconductors at the end of the day. Because one of the reasons Nvidia, if we're talking about share prices, one of the reasons if you bought Nvidia a few years ago, you'd be laughing. Right now is because their share price has gone mental because it turns out the GPUs are the best things for training LLMs and all that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and a sort of principal initiative that America has had to try and ensure that it stays ahead of China on AI is to restrict their access to NVIDIA GPUs and restrict their access also to the technology you need to be able to make semiconductors at the most cutting edge process levels. So 10 nanometers and below, perhaps even higher than that. And we've spoken about it loads of times on the pod, and Ian just alluded to it, whether it's extreme ultraviolet versus a deep ultraviolet.
Yeah, but I think that's a bigger issue than they're behind on GPUs to NVIDIA.
What do you mean?
I don't think this argument that NVIDIA is way ahead of everybody on GPUs, way ahead of China on GPUs.
Well, the American state seems to think so.
Of course they do.
Yeah, and
there's no doubt they don't want their chips being sold any more than they want Qualcomm chips being sold, or whoever's chips being sold.
Remember what happened with DeepSeek, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing is like, the more we put pressure on China not to give them the good technology, the better they got at finding.
Yeah, that's Jensen Huang's point.
Adversity is bringing strength, right?
If you can't manufacture it at 4 nanometer, that's a problem. But in terms of the actual design stuff itself, I'm not convinced that there's a massive lag.
And you just alluded to Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, and he's made that point, and I think you and he are both right. But nonetheless, the US state still seems to think that starving China of the best GPUs is a great geopolitical strategy. And anyway, so they shat the bed when earlier on this week, Malaysia...
I just think they want a cut-off, don't they? They want a break between the two technology ecosystems. They don't want... There's no reason why they want to sell American technology to China because they might go to war with it in 4 years' time. So you don't want China using American technology.
I think it's much more than just military. I think they genuinely just want to.
No, I'm saying that's the
ultimate
thought in the.
No, but I don't think it's just that. I think it's economic as well. They want to suppress China's economic development, full stop, whether it's military or otherwise.
They want to cut off the Chinese economy from the US economy, but that doesn't mean the Chinese economy.
Suppress it. They just don't want China to catch up.
I don't go along with this China catching up thing. China's already caught up. China doesn't need the US needs China more than China
what
needs.
I think the American foreign policy.
I think the US needs China economically more than the US needs China.
Well, that's a different matter. When you're talking about tariffs and all that, I agree with you on that. All I'm doing is expressing what I think American foreign policy is towards China when it comes to tech industry, and specifically germane to this story, which I better crack on with because we're running out of time.
You need to give more time to your stories at the end instead of 10 minutes.
Well, I try
and
to.
then go, well, we're trying to do it in 2 minutes.
You might notice that, like in the middle of the pod, I do try and interrupt a few times and go, we better move on. But I don't want to be too pushy, because if the conversation's flowing well...
You've tried to shoehorn 2 stories into 2 minutes.
I know. Yeah. And now 1 minute 30, because you just interrupted me. The funny thing about this story is Malaysia came out of this thing. They go, we've come out with what they call it, our strategic AI infrastructure, and it was a Malaysian cabinet minister saying it, the Secretary of sorting shit out, whatever she's called. And she went, it's going to be really great, and it's in partnership with loads of Chinese companies, and it's one of the best manifestations of using Chinese infrastructure outside of China, but it's still all sovereign cloud and all that sort of thing. And she said, and it's going to use all these Huawei GPUs, this Ascend series of GPUs that are, anytime you mention Huawei Ascend GPUs, it's like a trigger to the American state right now.
Right.
And so they announced this thing on Monday. And then by Tuesday, Bloomberg was writing a story where they'd reached out to them for comment, and the Malaysian government had gone, yeah, everything she said was bollocks. We're not doing it at all. Ignore all that. And they'd also got in touch with China and Huawei, and they'd gone, I don't know what she's fucking talking about. Anyway, and the hilarious thing about it is in Malaysia, this isn't the first time, because we've had this over Malaysia. They have a national 5G network. And then they started a second. The first one, I think, was mainly done in partnership with Ericsson, if I remember rightly. And they started a second one, and the EU and America were going, well, you better fucking not do that with Huawei, or we're going to be pissed off. So they did it with Huawei. And then this seemed like another example of Malaysia going up yours. I'm doing a middle finger gesture to people listening. But then within one day, they completely did a 180 and seemed to shit themselves. And that's what I find most funny about it. I'll read my concluding paragraph, and then if you two have got anything to say, then fine, and then I'll wrap it up because we're out of time. I'll say, perhaps the most remarkable part of this affair I wrote is the apparent obliviousness of Teo, which is this Malaysian politician who announced this, of Teo, her department, and it seems the Malaysian government to the geopolitical fire they were playing with. It's not like the US had been subtle or discreet in making its feelings clear about Huawei GPUs and Chinese AI infrastructure in general. Nonetheless, Malaysia seems to have been blindsided by its completely predictable response. Anyway, that's why I think it's funny. I feel for Malaysia because it's constantly trying to walk the tightrope between the US sphere of influence and the Chinese sphere of influence, and it seems to keep dropping the ball.
No, absolutely. And one comment I would make is that seems to be happening everywhere. Look at Amazon, right? They were going to come out and say, hey, the tariffs, we're going to show the tariff prices, how much it's impacting. Yeah. Remember, they came out, it's almost just like Malaysia, and all of a sudden,
and then that
next day,
woman just went.
Oh, she's like, it's economic. Yeah, she had a cow, right? And then they just completely pulled it back.
I suppose she's just the messenger, isn't she?
Just the messenger,
but she's the spokeswoman.
Yeah,
she's representative.
But I think this is indicative of what we see everywhere. And because think about it, because AWS is trying to play that thing between the public, its customers, right? This is who buys from me. I'm trying to make them good. And then they got trapped with the U.S. government. Malaysia's trying to do China, U.S. government. So everybody's getting trapped between somewhere.
We had it on the pod recently. A PC wrote about Microsoft saying that stuff to Europe and going, don't worry, even if we go mental.
Had a good chat about that. Yeah. Well, we'll put our source code in this little vault in Switzerland, and you can go and get it, and then try and figure out how to do cloud on your own.
And I guess it feels almost like a tug of love thing, like some kind of divorce film, where the rest of the world is some little kid that's being asked to choose between each parent the whole time, and all everyone else wants to do is just chill out and make some money and go to the pub.
It's good. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe
on that note, we go to the
maybe
pub.
On that rare example of a good analogy for me, we'll wrap it up there. Well, thanks, Brandon. It's great chatting to you, and we'll chat further in a minute.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This has been great, guys. A lot of fun. Thanks for the beer.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Emma, for the beer.
Yeah.
So just to remind you, you don't get one next week because Pierre's too selfish to not go on holiday on half term. So thanks a lot for listening, and join us in 2 weeks.